The night Victoria Hale heard a dead man's melody, her world stopped breathing. It was impossible. The song had never been finished, never been recorded, never existed beyond the notebooks her first love took to his grave 7 years ago. Yet here it was, complete, perfect, alive, pouring from the fingers of a maintenance worker in a janitor's uniform at her own company's Christmas party. She didn't know whether to run toward the piano or away from it. She didn't know whether she was losing her mind or finally finding the truth. Stay until the end. Like this video and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The Stonehaven Tower. Christmas party occupied 3 floors of steel and glass overlooking the city, where wealth didn't whisper, it shouted. Crystal chandeliers threw fragments of light across marble floors. Waiters in crisp white jackets carried trays of champagne that cost more per bottle than most people earned in a week. The guest list read like a Forbes feature. Executives, investors, politicians who'd learned to smile with their mouths closed. Victoria Hale stood near the windows on the 63rd floor, watching the city lights blur into watercolor streaks against the December cold. She held a glass of champagne she hadn't touched in 20 minutes. Her black dress was elegant in the way that discouraged conversation. Expensive, perfectly tailored, designed to maintain exactly 18 inches of personal space in all directions. She was 32 years old and looked like someone who'd learned to armor herself in silk and pearls. "Darling, you're doing it again." The voice belonged to Marcus Ashford, her fiancé, who materialized at her elbow with the practiced ease of someone accustomed to claiming space without asking. He was handsome in the way of men who'd never had to develop personalities. Strong jaw, expensive haircut, a smile that had been closing deals since prep school. "Doing what?" Victoria asked, though she already knew. "Standing alone, looking unapproachable." Marcus placed his hand on the small of her back, a gesture of possession disguised as affection. "This is a celebration, not a funeral. Your father's announcement is in 20 minutes. You could at least pretend to enjoy yourself." Victoria turned to face him, noting the slight glaze in his eyes that meant he was 3 drinks past charming and heading toward obnoxious. "I'm networking." "You're brooding." Marcus leaned closer, lowering his voice. "I know you hate these things, but appearances matter, especially tonight." He was right, of course. Tonight mattered. Her father, Richard Hale, would officially announce her promotion to Chief Operating Officer, the final step before she inherited control of Hale Industries. 37 years of building an empire, and it would all become hers. The company that manufactured precision instruments for medical devices, aerospace components, industrial automation. The company that employed 14,000 people across 6 countries. The company that had consumed her father's life and was now systematically consuming hers. "I'm aware," Victoria said. Marcus studied her face with the analytical gaze he usually reserved for quarterly reports. "You've been different lately. Distant." "I'm standing right here." "You know what I mean." His hand tightened slightly on her back. "Ever since we set the date, you've been—" "Marcus." Victoria's voice carried the temperature of the December wind outside. "Not here. Not tonight." For a moment, something flickered across his face, hurt, maybe, or anger carefully controlled. Then the corporate smile snapped back into place. "Of course. I'll go check on the presentation setup. Try to mingle, would you? The board members think you're made of ice." He kissed her cheek, a gesture as warm as a business card exchange, and disappeared into the crowd. Victoria watched him go, feeling nothing. That was the problem, wasn't it? She felt nothing. Not about Marcus, not about the promotion, not about the future everyone had so carefully constructed for her. It was like watching someone else's life through bulletproof glass. She turned back to the window, catching her reflection in the darkened glass. 7 years ago, she'd been different. Younger, yes, but more than that. She'd been someone who still believed in things that couldn't be quantified in quarterly earnings. Someone who'd fallen in love with a struggling composer who wrote music that made her believe the world contained magic instead of just markets. Daniel. His name was a bruise she didn't press anymore. They'd met at a charity gala much like this one, back when she'd been fresh out of business school and still naive enough to think she could have both, the life her father planned and the life she wanted. Daniel had been playing piano in the corner, barely noticed by guests too busy making deals to appreciate art. But Victoria had noticed. She'd stood by that piano for 2 hours, forgetting about networking, forgetting about advancement, forgetting about everything except the way his fingers found emotion in the keys that she couldn't find anywhere else. He'd written a song for her, never finished it, died in a car accident with the manuscript still incomplete, leaving her with a melody that played in her head at 3 in the morning when the corporate armor finally came off. "Ms. Hale?" Victoria turned. A young woman in a catering uniform stood at a respectful distance, holding a tray of hors d'oeuvres that probably cost $40 apiece. "No, thank you," Victoria said. The woman nodded and moved away, and Victoria felt a familiar twinge of guilt. How many of the servers tonight knew her name? How many of them saw her as anything other than the Ice Queen executive who never smiled, never stumbled, never showed weakness? She drained her champagne in one swallow. It tasted like expensive regret. Across the room, near the grand piano that sat like a decorative monument in the corner, Victoria spotted her father. Richard Hale was 73, but moved with the controlled energy of someone who'd long ago decided that aging was for people with less discipline. He was shaking hands with Senator Bradley, both men wearing the kind of smiles that accompanied the exchange of favors. The piano sat silent behind them. It always did at these parties. Too many people who didn't know how to play it, too few who cared to listen. Victoria checked her watch. 15 minutes until the announcement. She should go find her father, stand at his side, play the role of dutiful daughter and worthy successor. Instead, she found herself moving toward the bar, ordering another glass of champagne from a bartender who recognized her and poured without asking. "Rough night?" The voice came from her left. Victoria turned to find a woman about her age, dark hair pulled back in a severe bun, wearing a dress that screamed middle management. Her name badge read Sarah Chen, Accounting. "Just long," Victoria said, surprised to find herself responding at all. Sarah raised her wine glass in a sardonic toast. To Christmas parties that could have been emails. Despite herself, Victoria felt her mouth twitch. "You're not enjoying the festivities?" "Oh, I'm having a wonderful time watching people network their way up the ladder while pretending to care about holiday spirit." Sarah took a sip of wine. "Though I suppose you're already at the top of that ladder. Must be a different view." Victoria should have ended the conversation there, should have excused herself with practiced politeness and moved on. But something about Sarah's directness was refreshing in a room full of careful words. "It's not as different as you'd think," Victoria said. "The ladder just gets narrower, more places to fall." Sarah studied her with open curiosity. "You know, I've worked here for 6 years, and I don't think I've ever heard you say anything that wasn't about quarterly projections or operational efficiency. Maybe I'm having a rough night after all. Or maybe you're human." Sarah glanced around the room. "Everyone here treats you like some kind of corporate deity, untouchable, perfect." Must get exhausting. Victoria felt something crack in her chest just slightly. "You have no idea." Before Sarah could respond, a commotion near the elevator drew their attention. The crowd parted, voices rising in that particular frequency that meant something interesting was happening. Victoria saw Marcus first, his face flushed with anger. Then she saw the man he was confronting, blue maintenance uniform, tool belt hanging at his hip, dark hair that needed cutting. He was maybe 35, with the kind of face that suggested he'd learned to make himself invisible, forgettable features arranged into an expression of careful neutrality. Next to him stood a little girl, maybe 7 years old, wearing a red velvet dress that had clearly been chosen with great care. She clutched his hand with the fierce grip of a child in an unfamiliar environment. "Not supposed to be on this floor," Marcus was saying, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "This is a private event for executives and their guests." The maintenance worker, Victoria couldn't remember seeing him before, spoke quietly. "I was told all Hale Industries employees were invited. The email said..." "The email was for salaried employees." Marcus's voice dripped condescension. "Not building services. Someone clearly made a mistake." The little girl pressed closer to her father's side. Her eyes were wide, scanning the crowd of strangers in expensive clothes. Victoria saw her father's hand tighten around hers, protective. "I apologize for the confusion," the man said, his voice carefully neutral. "We'll leave." "Good. And next time, know your place before..." "Marcus." Victoria's voice cut through the tension like a blade through silk. She moved through the crowd, aware of eyes tracking her movement. Sarah followed at a slight distance, intrigued. Marcus turned, his expression shifting from aggressive to charming in the space of a heartbeat. Victoria, I was just explaining to Shh. I heard what you were explaining. Victoria looked at the maintenance worker, really looked at him. There was something in his eyes, carefully hidden. Intelligence, maybe. Or sadness worn smooth by years of practice. What's your name? The man hesitated as if trying to decide whether answering would make things better or worse. Ethan. Ethan Cole. This is my daughter, Sophie. Sophie peeked out from behind her father's leg, then quickly retreated when she saw everyone looking at her. Mr. Cole. Victoria kept her voice professional, neutral. Are you an employee of Hale Industries? Yes, ma'am. Maintenance and facilities. Third shift, usually. Then you were invited correctly. The email specified all employees, not all salaried employees. She turned to Marcus, her expression cool. Perhaps there was confusion in the communications department. Marcus's jaw tightened. Victoria, surely you can see this is inappropriate. This is a formal event for employees celebrating the company's success. Victoria looked around at the crowd of executives and investors. Mr. Cole's work contributes to that success as much as anyone's here, probably more than some. The silence that followed had weight. Victoria could feel her father's eyes on her from across the room, could sense the board members recalculating, updating their assessments. This wasn't the Victoria Hale they knew, the one who never made scenes, never challenged the established order, never questioned the invisible lines that separated people like them from people like Ethan Cole. She didn't know why she was doing it. Maybe Sarah's comment about being human had lodged somewhere in her defenses. Maybe she was tired of watching Marcus bully people from a position of inherited advantage. Maybe she just wanted to do one thing tonight that felt real. I apologize for the confusion, Victoria said to Ethan, her tone formal but not cold. Please enjoy the party. The bar's open, and there's food on the second level. Sophie, I believe there's a dessert table that would appreciate your attention. Ethan looked at her for a long moment, and Victoria had the strangest sensation that he was seeing through her, past the designer dress and the corporate armor, down to something she'd forgotten existed. Thank you, he said quietly. That's very kind. Sophie tugged on his hand. Daddy, can we get cookies? The tension broke. Ethan smiled down at his daughter, and the transformation was remarkable. The careful neutrality disappeared, replaced by genuine warmth. Yeah, baby. We can get cookies. As they moved away, Marcus leaned close to Victoria, his voice tight with controlled anger. What the hell was that? That was me not letting you embarrass the company by creating a scene. Victoria kept her voice low, aware of listening ears. We can discuss your employee relations approach later. My employee relations? Marcus cut himself off, visibly struggling for composure. Fine. But don't lecture me about maintaining corporate culture when you're busy playing fairy godmother to the help. He walked away before she could respond, his shoulders rigid with suppressed fury. Sarah appeared at Victoria's elbow, eyebrows raised. Well, that was unexpected. I have meetings to attend, Victoria said, suddenly exhausted. Excuse me. She moved through the crowd toward her father, who was still near the piano, now alone. Richard Hale watched her approach with an expression she couldn't quite read. That was interesting, he said when she reached him. It was necessary. Marcus was out of line. Her father's eyes were sharp despite his age. Marcus was maintaining appropriate boundaries. You undermined him in front of colleagues and clients. He was bullying an employee in front of the entire company. There's a difference. Richard studied her, and Victoria had the uncomfortable sensation of being analyzed like a balance sheet. You're not yourself tonight. I'm fine. You're distracted, unfocused. I need to know that when I make the announcement tonight, you're ready for what comes next. The board is already concerned about your age. If they sense weakness, they won't. Victoria straightened her shoulders, feeling the familiar weight of expectation settle back into place. I'm ready. Her father nodded slowly. Good. Because once this announcement is made, there's no going back. You'll be COO by January and CEO within 3 years when I retire. Everything I've built will be yours. Everything he'd built. Not everything she'd built. Not everything she'd chosen. Just the empire he'd constructed, brick by brick, sacrifice by sacrifice, until there was nothing left of the man except the company. Victoria looked at the piano behind him, silent and decorative. I know, Dad. Do you? Richard's voice softened, just slightly. Because lately I wonder if you still want this. If you're committed to the path we've planned. Of course I am. Then prove it. Tonight, when I make the announcement, I want to see the daughter I raised. The one who understands that sentiment is expensive and profit is permanent. The one who knows that people like that maintenance worker, he gestured vaguely in the direction Ethan had gone, are part of the machinery, not part of our world. Victoria felt something cold settle in her stomach. Yes, sir. Good. Richard checked his watch. 10 minutes. I'll find you when it's time. He walked away, leaving Victoria standing alone by the piano. She placed her hand on the polished wood, feeling the smooth surface cool against her palm. When was the last time anyone had actually played this instrument? When was the last time anyone at one of these parties had created something instead of just consuming, acquiring, expanding? She thought about Daniel again, couldn't help it. He would have hated this party, would have stood in the corner making quiet observations, finding humor in the absurdity, writing mental notes for songs about people who'd forgotten how to be human. Victoria pulled her hand away from the piano like it had burned her. Excuse me? She turned to find a server, young woman, maybe 25, holding an empty tray. Yes? I was asked to inform you that the presentation room is ready whenever you are. Thank you. The server nodded and started to leave, then hesitated. Ms. Hale, what you did before, with that man and his daughter, that was really nice. Victoria opened her mouth to respond, but the server was already gone, disappearing into the crowd with practiced efficiency. Nice. When was the last time anyone had called her nice? She made her way through the party toward the presentation room, nodding at acquaintances, accepting congratulations from people who'd already heard about the announcement through the corporate grapevine. The board members watched her pass with expressions ranging from approval to calculation. They saw an asset, she realized, a continuation of Richard Hale's legacy, programmed to run the company with the same cold efficiency. They weren't wrong. The second level was less crowded, mostly younger employees enjoying the open bar and the dessert table Sophie had been promised. Victoria spotted Ethan and his daughter near the windows, Sophie holding a plate piled with cookies, while her father looked uncomfortable in the way people do when they're acutely aware they don't belong. Victoria should have kept walking, should have focused on the presentation, on the announcement, on the future that waited like a predetermined algorithm. Instead, she found herself moving toward them. Ethan saw her coming and straightened slightly, his expression neutral again. Sophie looked up at her with wide eyes, a smudge of chocolate at the corner of her mouth. Ms. Hale, Ethan said. Thank you again for earlier. You can call me Victoria, and you don't need to keep thanking me. Still. He shifted his weight, uncomfortable. Not everyone would have stepped in like that. Not everyone should have needed to. Sophie tugged on her father's sleeve. Daddy, is she the boss lady? Ethan smiled, embarrassed. Sophie, it's not polite to... It's fine. Victoria surprised herself by crouching down to Sophie's level, ignoring the very expensive dress that was definitely not designed for crouching. I work for the company, yes. What's your name? Sophie Marie Cole. The little girl spoke with the formal precision of someone who'd been taught manners. I'm 7.5. 7.5? That's a very sophisticated age. Sophisticated? Sophie tested the word, frowning. It means grown up and smart. Sophie beamed. I am smart. I got an A on my spelling test. That's wonderful. Victoria felt something strange happening in her chest, an unfamiliar warmth. Are you enjoying the party? The cookies are really good, but it's really loud and there's too many people. Sophie lowered her voice conspiratorially. Daddy says we can't stay too long because I have school tomorrow and he has to work tonight. You work tonight? Victoria looked up at Ethan. After the party? Ethan looked uncomfortable again. Third shift starts at 11. I'll drop Sophie at my sister's place first. You brought her here knowing you had to work after? She wanted to see where I work, and the email said families were welcome. He met her eyes directly for the first time, and Victoria saw something there that surprised her, pride mixed with defiance, like he was daring her to judge him. I'm a single parent, Ms. Hale. Sometimes it means bringing her places and making it work. Victoria stood, brushing imaginary dust from her dress. I wasn't criticizing. Weren't you? The question hung in the air between them, sharp and honest. Victoria realized she had been, in some automatic way, had been calculating the inefficiency, the lack of planning, the messy reality of a life that didn't fit neatly into corporate structures. No, she said, and meant it. I was just surprised. Most people wouldn't have come at all if it meant juggling childcare and work schedules. Most people probably have better options. Ethan's voice was dry, but not bitter. I take what I can get. Sophie, apparently bored with the adult conversation, pointed at the piano visible through the glass wall separating the levels. Look, Daddy, a piano like yours. Ethan followed her gaze and something flickered across his face. Longing, maybe, or pain. Not quite like mine, baby. That one's a lot fancier. Can you play it? It's not... Ethan stopped himself, looking at Victoria. I don't think that would be appropriate. Why not? Sophie's voice rose with childish confusion. You play all the time at home. You're really good. Sophie, I didn't know you played, Victoria said, genuinely curious now. Ethan looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. A little. Just for myself. And Sophie, obviously. He plays lots, Sophie said proudly. Every night before bed. He writes songs, too, really pretty ones that make me sleepy. Sophie, that's enough. Ethan's voice carried a warning, gentle but firm. Ms. Hale doesn't want to hear about our bedtime routine. But Victoria did want to hear about it, suddenly and intensely. Wanted to know what kind of songs a maintenance worker wrote for his daughter in the hours between shifts. Wanted to know what his hands looked like on piano keys, whether they moved with the same careful precision he probably used to fix broken machinery. Wanted to know anything that wasn't quarterly projections and board strategies and the endless march toward a future that looked more like a prison every day. Actually, she started. Victoria! Marcus's voice cut through from the stairwell. They're waiting. Your father's ready to start. Reality crashed back. The announcement, the presentation. The life she'd been preparing for since birth, waiting in a room full of powerful people who expected her to be someone she wasn't sure existed anymore. I have to go, Victoria said to Ethan, hating how the words sounded. Dismissive, corporate, cold. Of course. Ethan's neutral mask slid back into place. Thank you again for your kindness. Sophie waved, chocolate smudged and innocent. Bye, boss lady. Victoria walked away, feeling their eyes on her back. Marcus met her at the stairs, his expression tightly controlled. Everything all right? He asked, in a tone that suggested everything was definitely not all right. Fine. Let's get this over with. The presentation room was packed. Board members, senior executives, key investors, all the people who mattered in the world according to Hale Industries. Victoria took her position at the front next to her father while Marcus found his seat among the other department heads. Richard Hale commanded attention without effort. When he spoke, people listened. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us tonight. As we close another successful year, I want to talk about the future. Victoria stood beside him, aware of being watched, assessed, judged. She kept her expression neutral, professional, projecting competence and control. All the things a COO needed to project. Her father's voice washed over her, familiar words about growth and expansion and market dominance, about legacy and succession and the next generation of leadership, about Victoria specifically, her education, her accomplishments, her readiness to take Hale Industries to new heights. Everyone applauded at the right moments, smiled at the right times. No one asked hard questions. And so it is my great pleasure to announce that effective January 1st, Victoria Hale will assume the position of Chief Operating Officer. More applause. Victoria smiled, accepted congratulations, shook hands that gripped with varying degrees of enthusiasm and calculation. She was good at this part, the performance, the politics, the careful dance of corporate power. She hated every second of it. The announcement ended. People moved back toward the party, toward drinks and networking, and the continuation of business disguised as celebration. Victoria found herself trapped in a corner by board members wanting to discuss strategy, by executives wanting to position themselves for advantage, by investors wanting reassurance that the company would remain profitable under new leadership. She answered their questions with practiced ease, saying all the right things, projecting all the right confidence. And somewhere in the middle of a conversation about Q4 projections, she heard it. Piano music. It drifted up from the lower level, soft at first, almost hesitant, then growing stronger, more confident. The melody was unfamiliar but somehow achingly recognizable, like a memory she'd never actually had. Victoria lost track of the conversation. Someone was asking her about manufacturing capacity in the Czech facility, but the words became meaningless noise. The piano music filled the spaces in her head where thoughts usually lived, crowding out everything except the need to know who was playing and why it sounded like coming home. "Excuse me," she said, interrupting mid-sentence, not caring about the surprised looks. She moved through the crowd toward the stairs, following the music like a compass, finding true north. People called her name, tried to stop her for conversation, but she barely heard them. The melody had changed now, evolved into something more complex, more emotional, more impossible. Victoria reached the upper level and looked down through the glass wall at the piano below. Ethan Cole sat at the keys, his daughter beside him on the bench. His hands moved across the piano with fluid grace, finding notes that shouldn't have fit together but somehow created something beautiful. Sophie watched him with adoring eyes, occasionally adding her own small notes when he nodded permission, but it was the melody itself that made Victoria's heart stop. She knew this song. 7 years ago, Daniel had played her the beginning, had hummed the next few bars, explaining where he wanted it to go but hadn't yet found the notes, had written the opening movement in a notebook he'd kept in his apartment, the one that had burned in the fire 3 days after his funeral when the landlord couldn't reach his family. The song had died with him, had existed only in Victoria's memory, incomplete and haunting. So how the hell was Ethan Cole playing it now? Not just playing the beginning, playing all of it. Every note Daniel had imagined, but never written. Every progression, every harmony, every emotional crescendo that Victoria had only heard in fragments and dreams. Ethan's hands moved across the keys, and the melody unfolded like a story Victoria had been waiting 7 years to finish. It was beautiful and heartbreaking and impossible, and she felt tears burning behind her eyes for the first time since Daniel's funeral. Other guests had noticed now. The party noise faded as people turned to listen, drawn by music that cut through expensive conversation like truth through lies. Even the waitstaff had stopped moving, standing frozen with trays half raised. Victoria gripped the glass railing, her knuckles white. Ethan's eyes were closed, his face serene, lost in the music in a way Victoria had only ever seen Daniel get lost. Sophie leaned against his arm, her own eyes drooping with sleepiness despite the party around them. The melody built to its climax, then resolved into something soft and gentle, a lullaby, Victoria realized. He'd turned Daniel's unfinished masterpiece into a lullaby for his daughter. The final notes hung in the air, crystal clear, then faded into silence. For a moment, no one moved. The party guests stood frozen, unsure how to respond to something that transcended the usual boundaries of these corporate gatherings. Then Sophie whispered, loud in the silence, "That was really pretty, Daddy." Ethan opened his eyes, seemed to suddenly remember where he was. He looked around at the crowd of strangers staring at him, and Victoria saw him transform back into the invisible maintenance worker, the man who'd learned to take up as little space as possible. "Sorry," he said to no one in particular. "Sophie asked me to play. I should have." That was remarkable. The voice came from an elderly board member, someone Victoria vaguely recognized from quarterly meetings. The man was moving down the stairs toward the piano, followed by others, all wanting to know where Ethan had learned to play like that, what the song was called, whether he performed professionally. But Victoria couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't process what she'd just heard. She watched Ethan deflect the questions with polite, non-committal answers, watched him extract himself and Sophie from the growing crowd, watched him move toward the elevators with his daughter's hand in his. She should let him leave, should return to the presentation room, to the board members and executives in the future waiting to consume her. Instead, she found herself running down the stairs, her heels loud against the marble, not caring who saw or what they thought. "Wait!" Ethan turned at the elevator, his finger already on the button. Sophie yawned against his shoulder. Victoria reached them, breathless, her composure shattered. "That song, where did you learn it?" Ethan's expression was carefully neutral again, but something flickered in his eyes, caution or maybe fear. I don't understand. The song you just played, where did it come from? He glanced at Sophie, then back at Victoria. I wrote it for Sophie. No. Victoria shook her head, feeling something crack in her chest. No, you didn't. That melody. I know that melody. I've known it for 7 years. It was never finished. It couldn't have been finished. The elevator dinged. The doors opened. Empty. Ethan stood motionless, trapped between the elevator and Victoria's desperate intensity. Ms. Hale, he said quietly, I don't know what you think you heard, but don't lie to me. Victoria's voice broke and she didn't care. Please, that song. Someone I loved wrote the beginning. He died before he could finish it. So tell me how the hell you know it. Ethan looked at her for a long moment. Sophie was nearly asleep against him now, her small body going limp with exhaustion. Around them, the party continued, but it felt distant, unreal. I can't, Ethan said finally. I'm sorry. I can't tell you that. He stepped into the elevator with his daughter, and Victoria watched the doors close between them, sealing her away from answers that felt like the only real thing that had happened to her in 7 years. The elevator descended. Victoria stood alone in the empty hallway, her perfect composure shattered, her carefully constructed future suddenly uncertain. Behind her, Marcus called her name. The board members were waiting. Her father wanted to discuss transition plans. But all Victoria could hear was the echo of a melody that shouldn't exist, played by a man who shouldn't know it, carrying secrets that might destroy everything she'd built to forget. The party continued above and below her, but Victoria Hale stood frozen between floors, between lives, between the person she'd become and the person she'd buried 7 years ago with an unfinished song. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, she had no idea what came next. Victoria didn't sleep that night. She sat in her penthouse apartment overlooking the city, still wearing the black dress from the party, a glass of scotch warming in her hand. The lights of downtown blurred through the floor-to-ceiling windows, but she wasn't seeing them. She was hearing that melody, over and over, perfect and impossible. At 3 a.m, she pulled out her laptop and started searching. Ethan Cole, maintenance worker. Hale Industries' employment records showed he'd been with the company for 5 years, working third shift in building services. Clean record. No disciplinary issues. No remarkable achievements, no complaints. He was a ghost in the system, the kind of employee who did his job and disappeared. But before Hale Industries, the records went dark. No social media presence, no LinkedIn profile, no digital footprint beyond a current address in a neighborhood Victoria had never visited, and a phone number that went straight to voicemail when she called at 3:47 a.m. and hung up before the beep. She searched for Daniel's name next, even though she'd stopped doing that years ago. Daniel Rivera, composer, dead at 28. The articles about his death were still there, brief obituaries in local papers, mentions in music community forums. A promising talent gone too soon. No family, no estate, nothing left behind but memories and an unfinished song that Victoria had thought died with him. Except it hadn't died. Somehow, impossibly, it had survived. The scotch burned her throat. The sun started to rise. Victoria's phone buzzed with messages from Marcus, from her father, from board members. She ignored them all. At 7 a.m., she was still sitting in the same chair when her phone rang, her father's name on the screen. She let it ring 4 times before answering. You missed breakfast, Richard Hale said without preamble. We had a meeting scheduled to discuss transition logistics. I know, I'm sorry. A pause. Her father wasn't used to apologies from her. Are you sick? No. Then what's going on? Marcus said you left the party early, didn't answer his calls. Victoria closed her eyes. I needed to think. About what? Victoria, last night was supposed to be your moment. Instead, you spent it defending maintenance workers and disappearing before the board dinner. People are starting to ask questions. Let them ask. Another pause, longer this time. When Richard spoke again, his voice had an edge. This isn't like you. What happened? Victoria wanted to tell him. Wanted to explain about the song, about Daniel, about the impossible recognition that had shattered her carefully constructed defenses. But her father had never understood her relationship with Daniel, had seen it as a distraction, a phase, something she'd outgrow once she committed fully to the company. He'd been right, in the end. She had committed, had buried everything else. "Nothing happened," Victoria said. "I'm just tired." "Then rest. But be at the office by noon. We have work to do." He hung up without saying goodbye. Victoria sat holding the dead phone, watching the sun paint the city in shades of gold and gray. At 8:30, she finally moved, showered, changed into clothes that didn't smell like party champagne and expensive regret, made coffee she didn't drink, stood in her pristine kitchen and tried to figure out what the hell she was doing. At 9:15, she called her assistant. "Miranda, I need personnel files." "Good morning to you too." Miranda Chen had been with Victoria for 3 years and had learned to navigate her moods. "Which files?" "Ethan Cole, maintenance and facilities." A pause. "Any particular reason? Does there need to be one?" "No, but you've never asked for maintenance files before. Usually you only request executive level and above." Victoria gripped the phone tighter. "Well, I'm requesting them now. Can you send them over?" "Already pulling them up. Give me 5 minutes." The files arrived in 4. Victoria opened them on her laptop, scanning through information she'd already found, plus a few details she hadn't. Emergency contact. Sarah Cole, sister. Education, high school diploma. Previous employment, blank. Just a gap of years before he appeared at Hale Industries 5 years ago with a 7-year-old daughter and a job application filled out in careful handwriting. Where had he been before that? What had he been doing? Who had taught him to play piano like someone who'd studied for years, like someone who understood music not just technically, but emotionally? Victoria picked up her phone again. Put it down. Picked it up. She called Miranda back. "I need an address." "For Ethan Cole?" "Yes." Victoria, Miranda's voice carried a note of concern. "What's going on?" "Nothing. I just need to speak with him about something from last night. Something that requires a home visit instead of just calling him in." Victoria felt a flash of irritation. "Since when do I have to explain my decisions to you?" Silence on the other end. Then, quietly, "You don't. I'm sorry. Sending the address now." The line went dead. Victoria immediately felt guilty. Miranda didn't deserve that. She was just doing her job, being protective. But Victoria couldn't explain what she didn't understand herself. The address came through. An apartment building in South District, 40 minutes from downtown. Victoria looked at it for a long moment, then grabbed her keys. The drive took her through parts of the city she usually only saw from highway overpasses. The buildings got shorter, the paint more faded. Christmas decorations hung in windows, plastic Santas and string lights, the kind that came from discount stores instead of designer catalogs. Kids played on sidewalks despite the December cold. People walked to bus stops instead of climbing into private cars. This was where Ethan Cole lived, where he came home after third-shift maintenance work, where he raised his daughter on whatever salary Hale Industries paid its invisible workers. Victoria found the building, a 6-story walk-up with brick weathered by decades. She sat in her car for 10 minutes, trying to figure out what she was doing, what she would even say. "Hi, I know you from the company party where my fiancé insulted you, and I'm here because you played a Dead Man's song and I need to know how." Perfect. Not insane at all. She got out of the car anyway. The lobby smelled like old carpet and someone's cooking. A handwritten sign near the mailboxes warned residents that packages left unattended would be thrown away. Victoria climbed to the 4th floor, found apartment 4C, and knocked before she could change her mind. Nothing happened for long enough that she started to hope no one was home. Then she heard footsteps. The door opened 6 inches, stopped by a chain lock. Ethan Cole looked at her through the gap. He was wearing jeans and a faded t-shirt, his hair still damp from what must have been a recent shower. His eyes went wide with recognition, then narrowed with something that might have been wariness. "Ms. Hale, I need to talk to you." "About what?" "About the song you played last night. About how you know it." Ethan's jaw tightened. "I told you, I don't know what you're talking about. And I told you not to lie to me." Victoria kept her voice level, aware that neighbors might be listening. Please, 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking. I have to sleep. I work tonight. 5 minutes. Then I'll leave. Ethan studied her face for a long moment. Whatever he saw there must have convinced him, because he closed the door, unlatched the chain, and opened it again. Come in, but be quiet. Sophie's still asleep. The apartment was small but clean. A living room barely big enough for a couch and a scarred upright piano that looked like it had been rescued from somewhere. A tiny kitchen visible through a doorway. A closed door that must lead to a bedroom. The walls were decorated with Sophie's drawings, horses and rainbows and stick figures holding hands. Victoria stood in the middle of the room, suddenly aware of how out of place she looked. Designer coat, expensive bag, the armor of wealth in a space that knew how to survive without it. Ethan gestured to the couch. Sit, if you want. Can I get you anything? No, thank you. He leaned against the piano instead of sitting, arms crossed, defensive. So, 5 minutes. What do you want to know? Victoria sat on the edge of the couch, trying to organize thoughts that had been chaotic since last night. The song you played, the melody, I've heard it before. Lots of melodies sound similar. Not like that. That exact melody. Someone I knew 7 years ago wrote the beginning of it. He died before he could finish. Ethan's expression didn't change. I'm sorry for your loss, but I don't see what that has to do with me. Don't you? Victoria leaned forward. You played it perfectly. Every note he described but never wrote down. Every progression, every emotional arc. So either you're lying about writing it yourself, or somehow you accessed his unfinished work and completed it. Or, Ethan said quietly, I wrote a melody that happens to sound like one you remember. Music has patterns. Sometimes different composers find the same notes. That's bullshit and you know it. Ethan's eyebrows rose slightly. Apparently the Ice Queen executive didn't usually curse. Ms. Hale, Victoria, and stop evading. I heard what you played. It wasn't similar. It was identical to the beginning Daniel wrote, then continued exactly where he would have continued it. So tell me how. The name hung in the air between them. Ethan's carefully neutral expression flickered, just for a second, just enough for Victoria to know she'd hit something true. How do you know that name? He asked, his voice very quiet. Because I loved him. Because he wrote that song for me. Because I watched him struggle with the middle section for weeks before... Victoria stopped, her throat tight. Before he died. So I'm asking you again, how do you know it? Ethan was silent for a long time. He looked at the piano, then at the closed bedroom door where his daughter slept, then finally back at Victoria. Something in his face had changed, the defensive walls lowering just slightly. Daniel Rivera, he said. Composer. Studied at Berkeley for 2 years before money ran out. Worked as a session musician, played weddings and corporate events to pay rent. Lived in a studio apartment in Riverside District. Had a girlfriend who worked for some big corporation. Died in a car accident 7 years ago. Victoria felt her breath catch. How? I knew him. Ethan's voice was soft. Not well, but I knew him. That's impossible. Daniel never mentioned you, never talked about any... Victoria stopped, realization hitting her. Wait, you're a musician too. You knew him through music. We crossed paths a few times. Session work, mostly. He was better than me. Better than most people. Ethan looked at his hands. He used to talk about this song he was writing, said it was for someone special, someone who made him believe in things beyond the next gig. Victoria felt tears burning behind her eyes. That was me. I figured. But he never finished it. He kept saying the middle section wasn't right, that he couldn't find the emotional truth. And then he died, and the manuscript burned with everything else he owned. Ethan nodded slowly. I know. I heard about the fire, went to his apartment after, thinking maybe I could salvage something, but there was nothing left. So, how do you have the rest of the song? Because he gave it to me. Ethan walked to the piano, opened the bench, and pulled out a worn notebook. Not the whole thing, just notes, fragments, things he'd tried and discarded. He asked me to look at it one night after a session, said he was stuck and needed fresh ears. He handed Victoria the notebook. She opened it with shaking hands, recognizing Daniel's handwriting immediately. Messy notes scrawled across staff paper, arrows and crossed out sections and marginal notes. The beginning of the melody she knew, then fragments of the middle section, incomplete and searching. This is, her voice broke. This is his handwriting. I know. Why didn't you give this to someone, to his family? He didn't have family, you know that. Ethan sat down on the piano bench. And honestly, I forgot about it for a long time. It was just in my stuff, mixed in with other sheet music. I didn't look at it again until when? Ethan glanced at the bedroom door again. Until Sophie was born. Her mother left when Sophie was 6 months old, just walked out one day, said she couldn't do it anymore. And I was alone with this baby, terrified out of my mind, and I found that notebook while I was packing to move to a cheaper place. Victoria sat very still, listening. I started playing around with the melody, Ethan continued, trying to finish what Daniel had started. Took me almost a year to get it right. But when I did, he smiled slightly. Sophie would stop crying when I played it, would fall asleep in my arms while I worked through the progressions. So it became her song, our song. You had no right. Victoria's voice was harder than she intended. That was Daniel's work, his creation. He's been dead for 7 years. The work was abandoned. Ethan met her eyes, and I didn't steal it. I built on it, honored it, made it into something that gives my daughter comfort. That's not theft. That's legacy. That's not your decision to make. Neither is it yours. Ethan's voice stayed level, but there was steel underneath. You loved him, fine, but he's gone. And the only thing keeping his music alive is me playing it for my kid at bedtime. So forgive me if I don't feel guilty about finishing a song he would have wanted completed. Victoria wanted to argue, wanted to tell him he didn't understand, that he couldn't possibly understand what that melody meant to her. But looking at his face, at the way he held himself, protective, defiant, a single father doing his best with what he had, she saw something she recognized. The same look Daniel used to get when he talked about music, the same fierce belief that art mattered more than rules. Play it for me, she said quietly. Ethan blinked. What? The full song. Play it for me. Please. Ms. Hale, Victoria. And I'm asking, not demanding, just, I need to hear it again. Ethan looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. He turned to the piano, his hands finding the keys with the ease of long familiarity. The melody started softly, the same opening Victoria had heard Daniel play 100 times. Her eyes closed. She was 25 again, standing in a small apartment while a man she'd just met played music that made her believe in magic. Then the song moved into new territory. The middle section that Daniel had struggled with now resolved into something bittersweet and beautiful. Ethan's hands moved across the keys with the same fluid grace she'd seen last night, finding notes that felt inevitable in retrospect, like they'd always been there waiting to be discovered. The melody built, climbed, reached for something just out of reach, and then found it. The resolution was perfect. Not happy exactly, but true. The kind of truth that acknowledged pain and chose beauty anyway. When Ethan played the final notes, Victoria realized she was crying. Silent tears running down her face. 7 years of grief, finally finding release. Ethan turned on the bench, saw her tears, and looked away, giving her privacy. He would have loved that, Victoria said when she could speak again. The way you finished it. He would have been proud. Thank you. They sat in silence for a moment, the melody still hanging in the air like something tangible. Why are you working maintenance? Victoria asked suddenly. If you can play like that, compose like that. Because I have a daughter to feed. Ethan's voice was matter of fact. Because steady income beats artistic dreams when you're a single parent. Because the world doesn't care how well you play piano if you can't pay rent. You could teach, session work, like Daniel did. I tried. For a while. Ethan stood, walked to the small window overlooking the street. But session work is unstable. Some months you eat, some months you don't. And I needed stability for Sophie, so I found a job with benefits and regular hours, and I play piano for my kid instead of strangers. That's... Victoria stopped, not sure what she wanted to say. That it was a waste? That he was better than this? But who was she to judge how someone chose to survive? It's what it is, Ethan said, reading her thoughts. Not everyone gets to follow their dreams, Ms. Hale. Some of us just do what works. The bedroom door opened. Sophie emerged, rubbing her eyes, wearing pajamas covered in cartoon cats. She saw Victoria and stopped, suddenly shy. "Daddy? Why is the boss lady here?" Ethan smiled, and Victoria saw his whole face transform again. "She came to talk about music, baby. Nothing to worry about." Sophie patted over to her father, still looking at Victoria with uncertain curiosity. "Are you staying for breakfast?" Victoria looked at Ethan, who shrugged, leaving the decision to her. "I should probably go." "We have cereal," Sophie offered, "and Daddy makes really good eggs." Victoria found herself smiling despite everything. "I'm sure he does, but I have to get to work." On Saturday, out of the mouths of children, Victoria stood, suddenly aware of how ridiculous this all was. The CEO-to-be sitting in a maintenance worker's apartment, crying over a song and being invited to breakfast by a 7-year-old. "Even on Saturday," Victoria said gently. She walked to the door, then turned back. Ethan was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Can I ask you something?" Victoria said. "Sure." "Last night, at the party, you could have said no when Sophie asked you to play. Could have avoided all of this. Why didn't you?" Ethan was quiet for a moment. "Because she asked me to. Because she wanted to share something she loves with people. And because—" He glanced at his daughter, then back at Victoria. "Because I'm tired of making myself invisible. Tired of pretending I'm less than I am just so other people feel comfortable." Victoria thought about Marcus, about the board members, about her father, and everyone else who'd spent years teaching her that people like Ethan belonged in one world, and people like her belonged in another. "Good," she said quietly. "You shouldn't have to." She left before either of them could respond, walking down 4 flights of stairs with Daniel's melody playing in her head and questions multiplying faster than answers. The drive back to downtown was a blur. Victoria barely remembered it. She went straight to the office, ignoring the Saturday quiet, ignoring Miranda's surprised look when she walked past reception. In her office, she pulled out the employee database again, started searching for something she should have looked for earlier. 7 years ago. The year Daniel died. The year Hale Industries had been expanding their manufacturing division, acquiring smaller companies, consolidating facilities. She found it buried in old incident reports. A factory accident at one of the newly acquired facilities. An equipment malfunction. Safety protocols not yet standardized across the merged operations. 3 workers injured, 1 severely. The severely injured worker's name was Ethan Cole. Victoria read the report 3 times, her hands shaking. The accident had happened 2 months before Daniel's death. Ethan had been a quality control technician at the factory. The equipment malfunction had crushed his right hand, requiring multiple surgeries and months of physical therapy. The investigation had concluded it was a preventable accident. Safety guards that should have been installed after the acquisition weren't in place yet. Hale Industries had settled quietly. Medical bills covered, some compensation paid. The worker moved to a different position. All perfectly legal, all properly documented. No admission of fault. But Ethan Cole's career as a pianist had ended that day. Victoria sat back in her chair, feeling sick. Her father's company had destroyed Ethan's life, had taken away his ability to do the thing he loved, the thing he was gifted at. And instead of fighting, instead of suing, instead of making noise, Ethan had taken the settlement and disappeared into a maintenance position where he wouldn't cause trouble, where he'd be invisible. Her phone buzzed. "Marcus, where are you? Your father's been trying to reach you all morning." "I'm at the office." "Good. We need to talk about last night, about that maintenance worker." Victoria felt something cold settle in her chest. "What about him?" "I did some digging. Turns out he has a history with the company, an accident settlement from 7 years ago, and now he shows up at the Christmas party, makes a scene with that piano performance." "He didn't make a scene. His daughter asked him to play." "And suddenly, you're defending him, running off, acting completely out of character." Marcus's voice had an edge. "It looks bad, Victoria. The board is already concerned about your judgment." "My judgment is fine." "Is it? Because from where I'm standing, you're letting personal feelings interfere with professional responsibilities. That worker should have known better than to draw attention like that. Should have stayed in his lane." "His lane, monsieur." Victoria's voice was very quiet. You mean the lane where people like him are invisible? Where they fix things and clean things and never remind people like us that they're human? Silence on the other end. Then, what's gotten into you? Nothing. Everything. I don't know. Victoria rubbed her eyes. I'm tired, Marcus. That's all. Then come home. Rest. We'll have dinner tonight. Talk this through. I can't. I have work to do. Victoria, she hung up, sat staring at the employee file on her screen, at Ethan Cole's accident report, at the evidence of her family's company destroying someone's dreams and covering it with paperwork and money. Her phone rang again. Her father this time. She let it go to voicemail. The office was too quiet, too empty. Victoria stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city her father had conquered with steel and determination and the kind of ruthless efficiency that didn't worry about casualties. She thought about Ethan, going to work every night in the building owned by the company that had destroyed his hand, playing piano for his daughter on an old upright in a tiny apartment, finishing Daniel's song not for recognition or money or revenge, but because it gave his child comfort. She thought about herself, standing in a corner office, wearing a future that felt more like a cage every day. Her phone buzzed with a text. Miranda. Your father is on his way up. Thought you should know. Victoria took a deep breath, straightened her shoulders, and waited. Richard Hale walked into her office 3 minutes later, closing the door behind him. He looked at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. You want to tell me what's going on? Nothing's going on. Don't lie to me, Victoria. I've known you your entire life. I can tell when something's wrong. Victoria met his eyes. Can you? Because lately I'm not sure you see me at all. Just the position you need me to fill. Her father's expression hardened. That's unfair. Is it? Victoria heard her voice rising and didn't stop it. When's the last time you asked me what I wanted? Not what the company needs, not what the board expects, what I actually want. What you want is irrelevant. You're a Hale. You have responsibilities. To what? To a company that destroys people's lives and covers it up with settlement checks? Richard's eyes narrowed. What are you talking about? Ethan Cole, the maintenance worker from last night. Did you know he used to be a musician, a pianist? Until one of our factories crushed his hand because we hadn't bothered to install proper safety equipment after an acquisition. Her father was quiet for a moment. That was 7 years ago. The matter was settled. Settled, right. Money paid, problem disappeared. Problem shatramat. Except the problem was a human being whose career ended because we were more worried about profit margins than safety standards. Victoria, that's not fair. Accidents happen. Preventable accidents. The report says so. Victoria felt 7 years of buried anger rising. We destroyed his life and paid him off and moved on. And now he works for us anyway because he needs the job. Because he has a daughter to support. And we don't even see him. What does any of this have to do with you? Richard's voice was sharp now. Why do you care about some maintenance worker's sob story? Because he knew Daniel. The name landed like a bomb. Richard's expression went carefully blank. Daniel's dead, Victoria. He's been dead for 7 years. You need to let that go. I did let it go. I buried it. Buried him. Buried everything I felt because you needed me to focus on the company. Victoria's voice shook. And now it's back. The song Daniel wrote for me. Ethan finished it. Plays it for his daughter every night. And hearing it again made me realize how much I've lost. How much I've given up to become what you need me to be. Richard walked to her desk, his movements controlled. What exactly are you saying? I'm saying I don't know if I can do this anymore. Do what? Any of it. The COO position, the board meetings, the future where I turn into you. Victoria looked at her father, really looked at him. You gave everything to this company, Dad. Everything. And what did it give you back? A corner office and a legacy built on making money while people like Ethan Cole suffer. Her father's face had gone red. That's enough. Is it? Because I'm just getting started? I said enough. Richard slammed his hand on the desk, the sound echoing in the quiet office. I have sacrificed everything to build this company, to give you opportunities I never had, and now you're going to throw it away because some maintenance worker played a song that reminds you of a relationship that ended 7 years ago? He didn't just play a song. He showed me what I've become, what we've all become. And what's that? Empty. Victoria felt tears threatening again and didn't care. Rich and successful and completely empty. Her father stared at her for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was cold. You're overwrought, emotional. Take the weekend. Clear your head. We'll discuss this Monday when you're thinking rationally. I'm thinking rationally now. No, you're not. You're letting sentiment cloud your judgment. Again. Richard straightened his tie, his movements precise. I'll see you Monday morning. And Victoria, whatever you think you need to do to work through this, do it quickly. The board announcement has been made. You're the COO as of January 1st, whether you like it or not. He walked out, closing the door with careful control. Victoria sat down heavily in her chair, her hands shaking. Through the window, the city sprawled in every direction, full of people living lives she'd never see, struggling with problems she'd never understand. She pulled out her phone, scrolled to Miranda's contact, hesitated. Then she called anyway. Miranda, I need you to pull some more files for me. Which ones? Every accident report from the past 10 years. Every settlement. Every time Hale Industries paid someone to go away quietly. A long pause. Victoria, what are you doing? I don't know yet, but I need to see the truth, all of it. That's going to raise questions. Your father will let him raise questions. Can you get me the files or not? Another pause, then, I'll have them Monday morning. Thank you. Victoria hung up and sat in the silence of her corner office, watching the sun set over a city that suddenly felt full of ghosts. Daniel's ghost. Ethan's ghost. The ghost of who she might have been if she'd chosen differently 7 years ago. Her phone buzzed one more time. A text from an unknown number. Thank you for understanding and for listening. EC. Ethan must have gotten her number from company records. The text was simple, professional, but underneath it, Victoria heard everything unsaid, the vulnerability of letting her into his home, into his story, the risk of finishing a dead man's song, the quiet strength of choosing survival over dreams. She typed a response, deleted it, typed again. The song is beautiful. Daniel would have been proud. She hit send before she could overthink it. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. He would have been proud of you too. Victoria stared at the message, feeling something crack open in her chest. How did Ethan know what Daniel would have thought? They'd barely known each other. And yet somehow, reading those words, Victoria believed them. She stood, grabbed her coat, and left the office. Left the files and the responsibilities and the future everyone expected. Drove through the city as Christmas lights began to glow in the gathering dark. She didn't know where she was going, didn't know what came next. But for the first time in 7 years, she was starting to ask the right questions. And sometimes that was enough. The files arrived Monday morning in 3 boxes. Miranda wheeled them into Victoria's office on a cart, her expression carefully neutral. Everything you asked for, 10 years of accident reports, settlements, and legal resolutions. She paused at the door. Your father's assistant called twice this morning asking about your schedule. Tell her I'm in meetings all day. Miranda nodded but didn't leave. Victoria, can I ask what you're looking for? Patterns? Truth? I don't know yet. Victoria opened this first box, pulled out a folder at random. How many of these are there total? 47 incidents with settlements, ranging from minor workplace injuries to major accidents, all resolved privately. Miranda crossed her arms. All perfectly legal if that's what you're worried about. That's exactly what I'm worried about. Victoria scanned the first report. A factory worker who'd lost 2 fingers in a machinery accident. Settlement, $75,000. Non-disclosure agreement signed. Case closed. Legal doesn't mean right. No, but it means the company followed protocol. Protocol designed to protect the company, not the workers. Miranda was quiet for a moment. You sound different. Do I? Like you're angry. I don't think I've ever heard you angry before. Victoria looked up at her assistant, this woman who'd worked beside her for 3 years and probably knew her better than Marcus did. I'm tired, Miranda. Tired of pretending everything is fine when it's not. What changed? Nothing. Everything. Victoria gestured at the boxes. These files have always existed. These people have always suffered. I just decided to stop looking away. Miranda studied her for a long moment, then closed the office door. When she spoke again, her voice was lower. My cousin worked at one of our facilities in Ohio 4 years ago. There was a chemical leak, minor according to the incident report. He developed respiratory problems. The company paid his medical bills and gave him a settlement on the condition he sign an NDA and resign. Victoria felt her stomach tighten. I didn't know. You weren't supposed to know. That's how it works. Miranda's expression was carefully controlled. I'm not telling you this to make you feel guilty. I'm telling you because whatever you're doing with these files, be careful. Your father built this company on efficiency. That includes efficiently handling problems. By paying them off. By protecting the bottom line, which is what you're expected to do as COO. Miranda moved toward the door. Just remember, you can't fix everything, and trying might cost you everything you have. She left before Victoria could respond. The words hung in the empty office. You can't fix everything. It was probably true. But that didn't mean Victoria could keep ignoring the cost of her family's success. She spent the next 6 hours reading files. Each one was a story of pain reduced to paperwork. A maintenance worker who'd fallen from scaffolding due to inadequate safety harnesses. A quality inspector exposed to toxic materials because protective equipment hadn't arrived yet. A machine operator whose hearing was permanently damaged by equipment that exceeded noise regulations. All of them settled quietly. All of them disappeared. By the time Victoria looked up, the sun was setting again. Her office was dark except for her desk lamp. The boxes sat half empty around her, evidence of systematic negligence disguised as unfortunate accidents. Her phone rang. Marcus. For the 5th time that day. She let it go to voicemail, listened to his increasingly frustrated messages. Victoria, where are you? Your father wants to see us both. Victoria, this silent treatment is childish. Call me back. Victoria, I don't know what game you're playing, but the board meeting is Thursday, and you need to be present. She deleted them all. A new text arrived as she was packing up to leave. Ethan again. Sophie asked if you wanted to come to her winter concert Wednesday night. I told her you're probably busy, but she insisted I ask. Victoria stared at the message. She should say no. Should maintain professional boundaries. Should focus on the impending board meeting where her future would be officially voted on. Instead, she typed, "What time?" The response came immediately. 7 p.m., Lincoln Elementary. No pressure if you can't make it. I'll be there. She hit send before rationality could intervene, then sat looking at her phone like it had betrayed her. She had no business going to a child's school concert, no business maintaining any contact with Ethan Cole beyond professional necessity, no business letting this strange connection pull her further from the life she'd spent 7 years building. But she was going anyway. Victoria drove home through traffic, her mind churning. The penthouse felt especially empty tonight, all glass and steel and carefully curated art. She poured a glass of wine she didn't drink, stood at the window watching the city lights. Her phone rang. Her father this time. She almost didn't answer, but years of conditioning won out. Victoria, my office tomorrow morning, 8 sharp. Good evening to you too, Dad. Don't be flippant. We need to discuss your behavior. Richard's voice was tight. Miranda told me about the files you requested. What exactly are you looking for? Information. About what? About the cost of doing business the Hale Industries way. A pause. That's a dangerous path, Victoria. You won't like what you find. I already don't like it. Then stop looking. Richard's voice hardened. These settlements exist for a reason. Accidents happen in manufacturing. We handle them responsibly, pay fair compensation, and move forward. That's business. Fair compensation for destroyed lives, for permanent injuries, for careers ended because we cut corners on safety? We don't cut corners. We make calculated decisions about resource allocation. That's just a fancy way of saying we value profit over people. Victoria heard her father take a deliberate breath. You're being naive. Every company our size has incidents. What matters is how we handle them. We're better than most. We pay well, we cover medical costs, we silence people, make them sign NDAs so they can't talk about what happened, make problems disappear. Victoria's voice rose despite her intention to stay calm. That's not responsible, Dad. That's covering up systematic negligence. That's protecting the company from frivolous lawsuits and bad publicity. There's a difference. Is there? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks the same. Richard was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was dangerously soft. What brought this on? And don't tell me it's general concern for worker welfare. You've never cared about this before. Maybe I should have. This is about that maintenance worker, isn't it? The one from the party. Victoria didn't answer, which was answer enough. I looked into him, Richard continued. Ethan Cole, former musician, hand injury from our factory accident 7 years ago. Settled for $200,000 plus medical coverage. Works third shift maintenance now. Has a daughter, no wife. Lives in South District. He paused. You went to his apartment Saturday morning. Victoria's blood went cold. You're having me followed? I'm protecting my investment. You're about to become COO of a multi-billion-dollar company. Your associations matter. My associations... Victoria couldn't finish the sentence, rage choking her words. He's an employee. I was checking on something from the party. At his home? On a Saturday morning? Richard's voice carried an edge of disdain. Don't insult my intelligence. Whatever this is, fascination, guilt, misplaced sentiment, it ends now. The board meeting is Thursday. You'll be confirmed as COO, and this distraction will be forgotten. And if I don't want to be confirmed? The silence on the other end was absolute. Then, what did you say? You heard me. Victoria's heart was pounding, but her voice stayed steady. What if I don't want the position? What if I'm tired of inheriting a legacy built on treating people as expendable? Then you're a fool. Richard's voice went ice cold. Everything I've built, everything I've sacrificed, was for you, to give you power, security, a future. And you're considering throwing it away for what? Some misguided moral crusade? A maintenance worker who plays piano? Maybe it's not about him. Maybe it's about me finally asking what I want instead of accepting what you've decided. What you want is irrelevant. You're a Hale. You have responsibilities. To what? A company that destroys people's lives? To family, to legacy, to everything that matters. Richard's voice shook slightly, anger breaking through his control. Your mother would be ashamed of this conversation. The words landed like a physical blow. Victoria's mother had died when she was 12, and Richard rarely mentioned her. Using her now as a weapon, it was beneath him, and they both knew it. Don't, Victoria said quietly. Don't bring Mom into this. Why not? She understood duty, understood sacrifice. She would have wanted you to carry on what we built. She would have wanted me to be happy. Happiness is a luxury for people without responsibility. Victoria closed her eyes, exhausted suddenly. I have to go. Victoria, I'll see you at the board meeting Thursday. Until then, I need space. She hung up before he could respond, then turned off her phone entirely. The silence in the penthouse was crushing. Victoria walked to her bedroom, lay down fully clothed, and stared at the ceiling until exhaustion finally dragged her under. The next 2 days passed in a blur. Victoria avoided the office, ignored calls and emails, spent hours in coffee shops reading through files she'd photographed on her phone. Each incident report was a small tragedy. Each settlement was hush money. The pattern was clear, undeniable. Hale Industries wasn't evil. That would be easier to combat. It was simply indifferent. Profit margins mattered more than safety. Efficiency mattered more than employee welfare. The bottom line mattered more than the human cost. And Victoria was supposed to continue that legacy. Was supposed to sit in the corner office and make the same calculated decisions, weighing human suffering against quarterly earnings. Wednesday evening arrived cold and clear. Victoria stood in her closet, trying to figure out what to wear to an elementary school concert. Everything she owned screamed corporate executive or social event. Finally, she settled on dark jeans and a cashmere sweater. Still expensive, but at least not obviously so. Lincoln Elementary was in Sophie's neighborhood, a brick building that had seen better decades. Parents streamed through the front entrance, chattering and laughing. Kids ran around in various states of excitement and nervousness. Victoria felt utterly out of place. She found the auditorium, a multi-purpose room with folding chairs set up facing a small stage. Parents were claiming seats, setting up phones to record. Victoria stood in the back, scanning for Ethan. Miss Hale! Sophie's voice cut through the noise. She came running over, wearing a green dress with white tights, her hair pulled back with a sparkly headband. You came! I said I would. Daddy didn't think you really would. He said important people are usually too busy. Sophie grabbed her hand, tugging her forward. Come sit with us. We saved you a seat. Victoria let herself be pulled through the crowd to where Ethan stood near the middle section. He looked surprised to see her and something else. Nervous, maybe. You actually came, he said. Sophie invited me. Would have been rude to decline. Ethan smiled slightly. Right. Wouldn't want to be rude. Sophie bounced between them. I have to go backstage now, but I'm in the third group. Watch for me, okay? We will, baby. Ethan kissed the top of her head. Break a leg. Why would I break my leg? That would hurt. It's an expression. It means good luck. It's a weird expression. Sophie looked at Victoria. Do you say break a leg at your work? Sometimes. Usually in big meetings. Your job sounds scary. Victoria laughed despite herself. Sometimes it is. Sophie ran off to join the other performers. Ethan gestured to the empty seats. Shall we? They sat, Victoria acutely aware of the curious looks from nearby parents. She probably stood out, too well dressed, too obviously not from this neighborhood. But Ethan seemed unbothered, focused on the stage where teachers were organizing chaos into something resembling order. Thanks for coming, he said quietly. Sophie's been talking about it nonstop since I told her you might. I'm glad I could make it. Victoria paused. How's the hand? Ethan flexed his right hand automatically, a gesture that seemed unconscious. Same as always. Functional enough for maintenance work. Not quite enough for professional playing. I'm sorry for what happened. For what my family's company did to you. He looked at her, his expression unreadable. You weren't even there, not your fault. Maybe not directly, but it was Hale Industries, my family's legacy. Victoria kept her voice low. I've been reading the files. Your accident and dozens of others, all settled quietly, all swept under the rug. That's how these things work. It shouldn't be. Ethan studied her face. What are you planning to do about it? I don't know yet, but something. I can't just... Victoria stopped as the lights dimmed. We'll talk after. The concert started with kindergartners singing about snow, slightly off-key, and completely adorable. First graders did a percussion piece that was more enthusiasm than rhythm. Second graders performed a play about winter animals that involved a lot of felt costumes and forgotten lines. Then the third graders took the stage. Sophie stood in the second row, her eyes scanning the audience until she found them. Her face lit up when she saw Victoria, and she waved enthusiastically before the teacher shushed her. They sang 3 songs, something about jingle bells, something about snowmen, and finally a quieter piece about winter stars. Sophie's voice was clear and sweet, and she knew all the words. Ethan watched her with such obvious pride that Victoria felt something twist in her chest. This was what mattered, she thought. Not quarterly earnings or market share or efficiency ratings. This, a father watching his daughter sing, a child doing something she loved, a moment of pure, uncomplicated joy. When the concert ended, parents rushed forward to collect their performers. Sophie ran to Ethan, throwing herself into his arms. Did you see me? Did you hear me? I didn't forget any words. You were perfect, baby. Ethan hugged her tight. I'm so proud of you. Sophie turned to Victoria, suddenly shy. Did you like it? I loved it. You have a beautiful voice. Really? You're not just saying that because you're being nice? Really? You were the best one up there. Sophie beamed, then looked between them. Can Ms. Hale come get ice cream with us? Please, Daddy. Ethan looked uncomfortable. Sophie, I'm sure Ms. Hale has other plans. Actually, ice cream sounds perfect. The words came out before Victoria could stop them. Ethan raised his eyebrows. You sure? No, Victoria wasn't sure. She should go home, prepare for tomorrow's board meeting, call Marcus back, smooth things over with her father. Should maintain appropriate boundaries with an employee whose life her company had destroyed. I'm sure, she said. They ended up at a small ice cream shop 2 blocks from the school, the kind of place with sticky tables and too many flavor options. Sophie deliberated for 10 minutes before choosing chocolate chip cookie dough. Ethan got vanilla. Victoria chose strawberry and tried not to think about the last time she'd been in a place like this. They sat in a corner booth, Sophie chattering about the concert, about her teacher, about the upcoming winter break. Victoria found herself relaxing despite everything, drawn into the easy rhythm of their conversation. "So what do you do at your job?" Sophie asked between bites of ice cream. "Daddy says you're important, but he won't tell me what that means." "I help run a big company, make decisions about how things work." "Like a boss? Something like that." Sophie considered this. "Do you like it?" The question was so direct, so innocent. Victoria opened her mouth to give the expected answer. "Of course, it's challenging and rewarding. I'm privileged to serve," and found she couldn't lie to this child. "Sometimes," she said instead, "it's complicated. Grown-up stuff is always complicated." Sophie licked her spoon thoughtfully. "Daddy says his job is boring but important because it helps take care of me." "Is your job boring?" "Sophie," Ethan interjected, "maybe let Ms. Hale eat her ice cream." "It's okay." Victoria looked at Sophie. "My job isn't boring, but sometimes I wonder if I'm doing the right things, if I'm helping people or just making money." "Money's important though, right? Daddy says we need it for rent and food and my school stuff." "Money is important, but it's not the only thing that matters." Sophie nodded seriously, as if Victoria had imparted great wisdom. Then she went back to her ice cream, crisis of conscience apparently resolved. Ethan caught Victoria's eye across the table, something like understanding passing between them. They were both navigating complicated lives with imperfect solutions, doing their best with what they had. "I have to ask," Victoria said quietly, while Sophie was distracted. "Why did you stay? After the accident? You could have sued, fought for more. Instead, you took the settlement and started working for the same company that hurt you." Ethan was quiet for a moment, watching his daughter. "Because I needed stability more than I needed justice." Sophie was 2 years old. Her mother had just left. I was alone, injured, terrified. He looked at Victoria. "Your company offered me a deal. Good medical coverage, a job when I healed enough to work, enough money to get by. I could have fought for more, spent years in court, maybe won big, or I could take care of my daughter. Easy choice." "That's not fair. You shouldn't have had to choose." "No, but most of life isn't fair. You just deal with what's in front of you." Ethan's expression was matter of fact, no bitterness. "I'm not saying it was right, just that it was real." Victoria thought about the files, about all the other people who'd made similar calculations. Justice versus stability. Truth versus survival. They shouldn't have had to choose either. Sophie tugged on her father's sleeve. "Daddy, can we go to the park on Saturday? It's supposed to be sunny." "We'll see, baby. I might have to work." "You always have to work." Sophie pouted, then brightened. "Maybe Ms. Hale can come. Then you'd have to take a break." "Sophie?" "Actually," Victoria heard herself say, "I might be available Saturday." Ethan stared at her. "You're serious?" "Why not? I could use some air. Clear my head before—" She stopped, not wanting to mention the board meeting. "Before what?" "Before some things change at work." Victoria pushed her ice cream around. "Might be my last chance for normal human interaction for a while." Ethan studied her face, and Victoria had the sense he understood more than she'd said. "Okay, if you're sure. Park at 10? "I'll be there." They finished their ice cream, walked back to where they'd parked. Sophie hugged Victoria goodbye with unself-conscious affection, and Victoria found herself hugging back, surprising herself. "See you Saturday, boss lady," Sophie called as they walked to Ethan's car, a beat-up sedan that had definitely seen better days. Victoria drove home slowly, thinking about third-grade concerts and ice cream shops, and fathers who chose stability over justice because they had no other choice. Thinking about the board meeting tomorrow, where she was supposed to step into a role that would make her responsible for creating more impossible choices. Her phone was still off. She turned it on as she pulled into the parking garage, watched it explode with notifications. 23 missed calls, 47 texts, 3 voicemails from her father, each one angrier than the last. One text from Marcus stood out. "If you're not at the board meeting tomorrow, there will be consequences. Your father is furious, so am I. Whatever point you're trying to make, you've made it. Time to come back to reality." Reality. As if the past few days had been a dream, a vacation from real life. As if Victoria could just slip back into her role, forget about Ethan and Sophie, and all the files documenting human suffering. She sat in her car, engine off, staring at the concrete walls of the parking garage. Tomorrow, the board would vote to confirm her as COO, would make official her position as heir to the Hale Industries empire, would seal a future she'd spent 7 years building toward, and Victoria had no idea if she wanted it anymore. She thought about Daniel, about the song he'd written for her 7 years ago, about the life they might have had if he hadn't died, if she hadn't buried her grief in corporate ambition. She thought about Ethan, finishing that song for his daughter, choosing love over recognition. She thought about Sophie, asking if Victoria liked her job, accepting it's complicated as a perfectly reasonable answer. What did Victoria want? Not what her father wanted, not what the board expected, not what Marcus demanded. What did she actually want? The question felt dangerous, revolutionary, terrifying. Victoria got out of the car, rode the elevator to her penthouse, poured a drink she didn't finish. She stood at the window watching the city lights until her phone rang again. Her father. Again. This time she answered. "I'll be at the meeting," she said before he could speak. 10 a.m. I'll be there. A pause. "Good. We'll discuss your recent behavior afterward." "Yes, we will." Victoria's voice was calm. "We'll discuss a lot of things." She hung up, turned off the phone again, and went to bed. Tomorrow would change everything. One way or another, her life was about to transform. She just wasn't sure yet which direction it would go. The morning came too fast. Victoria dressed in her best suit, armor for battle. She drove to Hale Industries headquarters in silence, her mind strangely clear. No music. No rehearsing what she'd say. Just quiet. The boardroom was on the 65th floor, all mahogany and leather and power. The board members were already assembled when Victoria arrived. 12 men and 3 women who collectively controlled billions in assets. Her father sat at the head of the table, his expression unreadable. Marcus was there too, in his role as chief financial officer. He caught her eye, his look a mixture of relief and warning. "Victoria, good of you to join us." Richard's voice was formal, giving nothing away. "Shall we begin?" The meeting followed expected patterns, financial reports, operational updates, strategic planning discussions. Victoria participated when required, her answers professional and precise. No one mentioned her absence from the office, her ignored calls, the files she'd been reviewing. Finally, they reached the main agenda item. "As you all know," Richard began, "we're here to formally vote on Victoria Hale's promotion to Chief Operating Officer, effective January 1st. She spent 7 years preparing for this role, demonstrating exceptional leadership and strategic thinking. I believe she's ready to take Hale Industries into its next phase of growth." The board members nodded, offered polite words of congratulations. This was supposed to be a formality. The real decision had been made months ago. "Before we vote," Richard continued, "Victoria, would you like to say anything to the board?" This was her moment. Accept graciously. Thank them for their confidence. Commit to the company's future. Victoria stood, her hand steady on the back of her chair. "Actually," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the room, "there's something we need to discuss first." Richard's eyes narrowed fractionally. "Victoria, how many people has this company injured in the past 10 years? She looked around the table, meeting each board member's gaze. "How many workers have we paid to stay quiet about preventable accidents? How many lives have we damaged while protecting our profit margins?" The room went utterly silent. Marcus spoke first. "Victoria, this isn't the time. When is the time? After I'm COO? After I'm complicit?" Victoria pulled out her phone, photos of the incident reports ready. "I've spent the past week reviewing our settlement history. 47 serious accidents. 47 people whose lives were changed because we prioritized efficiency over safety. And we paid them all to go away quietly." One of the older board members, Henderson, she thought, cleared his throat. "Ms. Hale, those settlements are standard practice. Every manufacturing company." "I don't care about standard practice. I care about what's right." Victoria's voice stayed level despite her racing heart. "We destroyed a man's career 7 years ago because we hadn't installed safety equipment after an acquisition. He was a pianist. Now he works night shift maintenance because his hand was crushed in our machinery, and we paid him $200,000 to never talk about it." Richard stood slowly. "That's enough." "Is it?" Because I'm just getting started. Victoria looked at her father. You built this company on efficiency, on making hard decisions, on treating people as resources to be managed, and I was ready to continue that legacy. But I can't anymore. I won't. You're being emotional, Richard said, his voice tight, letting personal feelings cloud your judgment. No. I'm finally letting my judgment be informed by something other than spreadsheets. Victoria looked around the table again. I'm not saying we're evil, but we're indifferent, and that might be worse. Marcus stood. Victoria, please sit down. You're jeopardizing everything. Everything that was decided for me. Everything I was supposed to want. Victoria felt tears threatening and pushed them back. I'm 24 hours away from becoming COO of a company that hurts people and calls it business. So I need to know, if I take this position, will things change? Will we prioritize safety over profit? Will we stop silencing victims with NDAs? Will we actually become the ethical leader we claim to be in our mission statement? The board members exchanged glances. No one spoke. Richard's voice was ice. Sit down, Victoria, now. Answer the question first. This is not appropriate. Answer it, Victoria's voice rose. Tell me that if I become COO, we'll change how we operate. Tell me we'll value people over profit. Tell me I won't have to spend the rest of my career covering up our mistakes with settlement checks. Richard stared at her, his face flushed with barely controlled rage. The world doesn't work the way you want it to. Business requires hard choices. If you can't accept that, then what? I'm not fit to lead? Victoria felt something break free in her chest. Maybe you're right. Maybe I'm not fit to lead a company that operates this way. The silence in the room was absolute. What are you saying? Richard's voice was dangerous. Victoria looked at her father, this man who'd sacrificed everything for the company, who'd raised her to do the same. She saw the empire he'd built, the legacy he'd created, and she saw the cost, written in settlement files and silenced voices. I'm saying, her phone buzzed. A text. She glanced at it automatically. Ethan. Good luck with your meeting. Sophie says to tell you that you're brave, whatever that means for your work stuff. Victoria stared at the message. Sophie says you're brave. She looked up at the boardroom full of powerful people, at her father's furious face, at Marcus's desperate plea for her to stop, at the future they'd planned for her, waiting to consume her whole. And she made her choice. I'm saying I declined the position. The words hung in the air like smoke after an explosion. Victoria watched them land, watched the board members' faces shift from confusion to shock, watched her father's expression freeze into something unrecognizable. You what? Richard's voice was barely above a whisper. I declined the position of Chief Operating Officer, effective immediately. I'm resigning from Hale Industries entirely. Victoria's hands were shaking, but her voice stayed steady. I can't be part of a system that values profit over people. I won't. Victoria, think about what you're doing, Marcus started. I have thought about it all week, and this is my decision. Richard stood motionless for a long moment. Then he moved around the table with deliberate steps until he was facing her directly. Step outside. Now. Dad. Now. Victoria followed him into the hallway, aware of 15 pairs of eyes watching them go. Her father closed the door behind them with careful control, the kind that meant he was beyond anger into something colder. What the hell do you think you're doing? His voice was low, deadly. That was a performance, a tantrum. You just humiliated me in front of the entire board. I wasn't trying to humiliate you. I was being honest. Honest? Richard's laugh was bitter. You think honesty matters in there? You think those people care about your moral crisis? They care about stability, about continuity, about knowing the company is in capable hands. Then find someone else, because I can't do it. There is no one else. You're my daughter. You're supposed to... He stopped, his jaw working. Everything I've built was for you. Every sacrifice, every difficult decision. I built an empire so you'd never have to struggle like I did. And you're throwing it away for what? Some maintenance worker? A dead boyfriend's song? This isn't about Ethan or Daniel. This is about me, about who I am and who I refuse to become. Who you refuse to become. Richard's voice rose. You're a Hale. That's who you are. That's all you need to be. No. Victoria felt tears coming and didn't fight them. That's all you need me to be. But I'm more than a name, more than a legacy. I'm a person who doesn't want to spend her life covering up the damage we cause. Her father stared at her, and for a moment Victoria saw something flicker in his eyes. Pain, maybe, or something like grief. Then it was gone, replaced by cold assessment. If you walk away from this, there's no coming back. You understand that? No second chances. No reconciliation. You'll be out of the company and out of the family. The words were meant to wound. They did. But Victoria had expected them. I understand. And you're choosing this anyway? Choosing nothing over everything I've given you? I'm choosing myself, finally. Victoria wiped her eyes. I'm sorry it took so long. Sorry I let you believe I wanted this when I was just too scared to disappoint you. Richard's face was a mask now, all emotion locked away. Then there's nothing more to say. Clean out your office. I'll have legal draw up the paperwork. He walked back into the boardroom without looking at her. The door closed with a soft click that sounded like finality. Victoria stood in the hallway, her entire body shaking. She'd just destroyed her future in under 5 minutes, had thrown away 7 years of work, a position most people would kill for, her father's approval, had chosen uncertainty over security, questions over answers, and she felt lighter than she had in years. Her phone buzzed. Miranda. What the hell just happened? Your father just told me to pack your office. I quit. You… what? Miranda's voice climbed an octave. Victoria, are you serious? Very. I'll be there in 20 minutes to collect my things. This is insane. You just walked away from being COO. Do you have any idea? I know exactly what I'm doing. Victoria started toward the elevator. For the first time in a long time, I know exactly what I'm doing. She hung up before Miranda could argue further. The elevator ride down felt surreal. She'd taken this elevator hundreds of times, always heading toward something. Now she was heading away. The office looked the same as always when she arrived. Miranda had already started packing, moving with efficient precision even though her face showed clear distress. You want to tell me what happened up there? Miranda asked, not looking up from the box she was filling. I told the board I couldn't accept the COO position, that I couldn't be part of a company that operates the way we do. Because of the settlement files. Because of a lot of things. The files were just the final piece. Victoria started gathering personal items from her desk. There weren't many. She'd never decorated much, never made the space feel like hers. I know it seems crazy. It doesn't seem crazy. It seems brave and terrifying. Miranda paused, a framed photo in her hands. What are you going to do now? I have no idea. No plan. No backup. You just torpedoed your entire career on principle? Victoria laughed, the sound a little hysterical. When you put it that way, maybe it is crazy. Maybe. Or maybe you just did what the rest of us are too scared to do. Miranda set down the photo, Victoria at her MBA graduation, her father's hand on her shoulder. My cousin, the one from the Ohio facility. He never recovered. The respiratory damage is permanent. And he can't talk about it, can't warn other workers because of that NDA. I'm going to try to change that. Victoria looked at her assistant. I don't know how yet, but I'm going to try. Miranda nodded slowly. Then I guess you better get started. They packed in silence for a while. 7 years condensed into 3 boxes. Diplomas, awards, a few books. Evidence of a life Victoria had built that never quite fit. Her phone rang. Marcus. She let it go to voicemail, listened to him shouting about betrayal and ingratitude and throwing away everything. Deleted it. Another call. A number she didn't recognize. She answered cautiously. Ms. Hale? This is Jennifer Reeves from the Chronicle. I heard there was some excitement at the Hale Industries board meeting this morning. Care to comment? Victoria's blood went cold. How did you… I have sources, so it's true. You turned down the COO position? No comment. Come on. Daughter of Richard Hale walks away from a multi-billion-dollar empire? That's a story. Might as well tell your side. Victoria hung up. Within minutes, 3 more reporters called. Word was spreading fast. By tomorrow, this would be everywhere. Miranda looked up from packing. Press? Already. This is going to be ugly. Could be an opportunity. You wanted to expose how the company operates? Now you've got people's attention. Victoria considered that. She could go public, give interviews, detail the settlement files and the pattern of negligence, could turn her resignation into a platform for change. But that would destroy her father, would damage thousands of innocent employees, would make her look like a vengeful daughter airing family grievances. No, she said finally. Not like that. If I'm going to do this, it has to be right, not just revenge disguised as justice. Her phone rang again. This time it was Sarah Chen, the woman from accounting she'd met at the Christmas party. Holy shit, Victoria, did you really just quit? News travels fast. Are you kidding? The whole building is talking about it. Half of them think you're insane, the other half thinks you're a hero. Sarah paused. For what it's worth, I'm in the hero camp. Thanks, I think. Listen, some of us are getting drinks tonight. People who've been wanting to talk about the company's issues but were too scared. You should come. I don't know if that's a good idea. It's a great idea. You just blew up your life for principle. Might as well make it count. Sarah gave her an address. 8 o'clock. Come or don't, but the invitation stands. She hung up before Victoria could decline. Miranda taped up the final box. You're going, right? Probably shouldn't. I'm already on thin ice. You quit. There's no ice left. Just open water? Miranda grabbed her coat. Go meet with people who care about the same things you do. Figure out what comes next. You've spent 7 years playing it safe. Try something else. Victoria looked at the 3 boxes containing her entire professional life. I'm terrified. Good. That means you're alive. Miranda headed for the door, then turned back. For what it's worth. I'm proud of you. And I'm jealous. I wish I had the guts to walk away from things that hurt me. She left, and Victoria was alone in the office that was no longer hers. She stood at the window one last time, looking out at the city. From up here, it looked manageable, orderly, beautiful. From down there, it was messy and complicated and real. Victoria grabbed her boxes and left without looking back. The bar Sarah had chosen was in an industrial neighborhood, the kind of place with exposed brick and craft beer and bartenders with elaborate tattoos. Victoria arrived at 8:15, overdressed in her suit, carrying uncertainty like extra weight. Sarah waved from a corner booth where 5 other people were already gathered. Victoria recognized 2 of them from various departments: quality control, human resources. The others were unfamiliar. Everyone, this is Victoria Hale. Well, former Victoria Hale. Sarah made space. Victoria, this is the unofficial Hale Industries Ethics Committee. We meet monthly to complain about things we're too junior to change. Until now, said the woman from HR. Janet? Jennifer? You're not too junior to change things anymore. I'm not anything anymore. I quit. Exactly. A man Victoria didn't recognize leaned forward. No NDAs, no corporate loyalty requirements. You're free to talk, so talk. Victoria looked around at their faces. Young, mostly, diverse, intelligent. People who cared enough to meet secretly and complain. People who wanted better but didn't know how to achieve it. What do you want me to say? The truth, Sarah said simply. What made you walk away? What did you find in those settlement files? So Victoria told them. About Ethan's accident. About the pattern of negligence. About 47 lives damaged and paid to be quiet. About her father's indifference, the board's complicity, the systematic prioritization of profit over safety. They listened without interrupting. When she finished, the silence was heavy. We suspected, Janet or Jennifer said quietly. But we didn't know the scope. 47 settlements? In 10 years. Probably more that weren't officially documented. The man who'd asked her to talk shook his head. My name's David. I'm in manufacturing oversight. I've been flagging safety issues for 3 years. Every time, I'm told budget constraints prevent immediate fixes. But we always have budget for executive bonuses. Others chimed in with similar stories. Safety equipment delayed, complaints ignored, workers pressured to maintain productivity despite concerns. A pattern of valuing efficiency over human welfare. So what do we do? Sarah asked. Victoria walked away, but the rest of us need our jobs. How do we create change from inside? You can't, Victoria said. Not really. Not as long as the people at the top value profit over everything else. Then what's the point? We just accept that this is how it works? Victoria thought about Ethan, about the choice he'd made. Stability over justice, because he had a daughter to feed. About all the people in these files who'd taken settlements because they needed to survive. About the impossible choices created by systems that didn't value human dignity. No, she said slowly. But we have to be smart, strategic. We can't just complain. We need evidence, organization, a clear path forward. You sound like you have a plan. I don't. Not yet. Victoria pulled out her phone, opened the photos of settlement files. But I have information, and I have nothing to lose anymore. So maybe we figure it out together. They talked for 3 hours, drinking beer and sharing stories and mapping out possibilities. By the time Victoria left, they had the skeleton of a strategy: document current issues, compile evidence, approach regulatory agencies, build a case for systematic change. It wasn't much, but it was something. Victoria drove home energized despite the exhaustion. Her phone had 37 missed calls, reporters mostly, but also Marcus, her father's lawyer, several board members. She ignored them all. One text stood out. Ethan. Heard you quit. You okay? No pressure to answer. Just wanted you to know Sophie and I are thinking of you. Victoria smiled despite everything. She typed a response. I'm okay. Better than okay, actually. Still on for Saturday? Absolutely. Sophie's already planning the whole day. Victoria fell asleep that night in her expensive penthouse, surrounded by boxes from her office, with no job and no plan and no idea what came next. But for the first time in 7 years, she slept deeply, dreamlessly, peacefully. She woke to her phone ringing at 6 a.m., her father's lawyer. Ms. Hale, we need to discuss the terms of your departure. There are assets tied to your position, stock options, benefits. I don't want them. Whatever I'm entitled to, donate it to charity, workers' safety organizations, preferably. A pause. That's highly unusual. So is quitting the day before becoming COO. Draw up whatever paperwork you need. I'll sign it. She hung up and made coffee, watching the sunrise paint the city in shades of gold. Her phone rang again almost immediately, a number she didn't recognize. This is Victoria. Miss Hale? My name is Catherine Price. I'm an attorney specializing in corporate accountability and worker safety. I heard about your resignation, and I'd like to talk. Victoria's heart rate picked up. About what? About what you know. About those settlement files. About whether you'd be willing to testify if we brought a case against Hale Industries for systematic safety violations. Testify against my own father's company? Testify for the workers who've been silenced. For the ones still at risk. Catherine's voice was calm, professional. I've been investigating Hale Industries for 2 years, but I've never had anyone on the inside willing to talk. Until now. Victoria thought about Ethan's hand, about the man in the files who'd lost fingers, about her cousin's respiratory damage, about all the people who'd been paid to stay quiet. What would it involve? Meeting with my team, reviewing your evidence. If we have a case, filing suit and going public. It won't be easy. Your family will fight back. Hard. They're already fighting me. Might as well make it count. Victoria made a decision. When can we meet? Today, if you're available. Send me the address. I'll be there. The meeting was in a small office in a neighborhood Victoria had never visited. Catherine Price was a woman in her 50s with silver hair and sharp eyes. Her team consisted of 2 younger attorneys and a paralegal who looked barely old enough to drink. They spent 4 hours going through Victoria's evidence, the settlement files, the accident reports, the pattern of delayed safety improvements. Catherine took notes, asked pointed questions, built a timeline. This is substantial, she said finally. More than enough for a class action suit on behalf of injured workers, possibly enough for regulatory action. What happens to the company? Victoria asked. If we win? Depends on the judgment. Fines, almost certainly. Mandated safety improvements, possibly criminal charges, if we can prove willful negligence. Catherine looked at her directly. It could destroy Hale Industries, or at least transform it completely. You need to be prepared for that. Victoria thought about her father, about 14,000 employees, about the legacy he'd spent his life building, about Sophie asking if Victoria liked her job, accepting it's complicated without judgment. I'm prepared, she said. When do we file? After the holidays, give us time to build the strongest possible case. And Victoria? Catherine's expression softened slightly. This is going to get ugly. Your father will accuse you of betrayal. The press will paint you as either a hero or a villain. Your entire life will be scrutinized. You're sure you want this? Victoria thought about standing in the boardroom, watching the future she'd been promised close around her like a trap. Thought about Ethan playing Daniel's completed song for his daughter. Thought about choosing truth over comfort. I've never been more sure of anything. The next days passed in a blur of meetings and preparation. Victoria gave her statement, reviewed documents, helped Catherine's team understand the company's internal structure. She ignored calls from her father, from Marcus, from board members trying to convince her to reconsider. She didn't reconsider. Friday afternoon, she got a text from Marcus. Can we talk, please? 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking. Victoria almost deleted it. But 7 years together, even if it was the wrong relationship with the wrong person, deserved at least a conversation. They met at a coffee shop, neutral territory. Marcus looked exhausted, his usual polished appearance slightly disheveled. You look terrible, Victoria said, sitting down across from him. Feel terrible. Thanks for noticing. He attempted a smile that didn't quite land. I've been trying to reach you all week. I know. Why didn't you answer? Because there's nothing to say, Marcus. We're done. The engagement, the relationship, all of it. Just like that? 7 years gone? Victoria looked at him, this man she'd planned to marry, who'd never really known her. Were we ever really together? Or were we just two people playing roles? Marcus was quiet for a moment. I loved you. You loved the idea of me, the Hale Industries princess, the perfect corporate wife, but you never loved the actual person. Victoria kept her voice gentle. And I never loved you. I convinced myself I did because it was convenient, because it fit the plan, but I was lying to both of us. Because of him? The maintenance worker? No, because of me. Because I finally started asking what I wanted instead of accepting what I was supposed to want. Victoria reached across the table, touched his hand briefly. I'm sorry for wasting your time, for not being honest sooner. Marcus pulled his hand back. Your father thinks you've lost your mind, that you're having some kind of breakdown. Maybe I am, or maybe I'm finally waking up. You're throwing away everything. I'm choosing something different. There's a difference. Marcus shook his head. I don't understand you anymore. Maybe I never did. No, Victoria said sadly. You never did. And I never let you try. She left him sitting there, walked out into the December cold feeling lighter despite the heaviness of endings. Saturday morning arrived bright and clear. Victoria woke early, dressed in jeans and a warm sweater, drove to the park where she'd promised to meet Ethan and Sophie. They were already there when she arrived, Sophie bundled in a purple coat and matching hat, Ethan looking more relaxed than she'd seen him. Sophie spotted Victoria and came running. You came! Daddy said you might be too busy because of your job, but I said you'd come because you promised. I always keep my promises. Victoria smiled. Besides, I'm not too busy anymore. I quit my job. Sophie's eyes went wide. You quit? But you were the boss. Sometimes being the boss isn't as important as being true to yourself. Sophie considered this with the seriousness of a 7-year-old philosopher. Daddy says that all the time, about being true to yourself. Your daddy's very smart. Ethan joined them, his expression carefully neutral. I heard what happened. The whole city's talking about it. Good news travels fast. Is it good news? Victoria looked at him, this man who'd finished a dead man's song, who'd chosen his daughter over his dreams, who understood the cost of impossible choices. Yeah, I think it is. They walked through the park, Sophie running ahead to chase pigeons and jump in piles of leaves. Ethan and Victoria followed at a slower pace, the silence between them comfortable. I'm suing the company, Victoria said finally. Well, not me personally, but I'm helping attorneys build a case against Hale Industries. For the accident settlements, the safety violations, all of it. Ethan stopped walking. You're serious? Very. They're filing after the holidays. It's going to be messy, public. Your accident will probably be part of the evidence. She looked at him. I wanted you to know, in case you want to opt out, keep your privacy. Or I could opt in, add my voice to the case. Victoria's breath caught. You do that? Risk the settlement, the job, everything? I've spent 7 years being invisible, making myself small so I wouldn't cause trouble. Maybe it's time to stand up. Ethan watched Sophie playing. She deserves to grow up in a world where companies can't hurt people and pay them to shut up. If I can help create that world, even a little, that's worth the risk. It won't be easy. My father will fight back. He'll try to discredit everyone involved, including you. Let him try. Ethan's voice was quiet but firm. I'm done being scared. They stood watching Sophie, this child who'd brought them together in the strangest possible way. Victoria felt something shift in her chest, a door opening that she'd thought was sealed shut years ago. Thank you, she said quietly, for finishing Daniel's song, for showing me what it means to choose love over recognition, for reminding me that some things matter more than success. Ethan looked at her, and Victoria saw understanding in his eyes. He would have been proud of you, the choice you made. You think? I know. He used to talk about you sometimes, about how you were different from the corporate world you came from, how you understood music not just as sound, but as truth. Ethan smiled slightly. Looks like he was right. Sophie ran back to them, breathless and laughing. Can we get hot chocolate, please? They found a cafe near the park, sat in a window booth while Sophie chattered about school and Christmas and all the things she wanted for winter break. Victoria listened, participated, felt herself becoming part of something real instead of just playing a role. Her phone buzzed. Catherine Price. We've got 3 more plaintiffs willing to join the case, that people inspired by your resignation. This is happening, Victoria. Victoria looked at Ethan across the table, at Sophie with chocolate on her nose, at the life she was building from the rubble of the one she'd destroyed. Good, she typed back. I'm ready. The sun was setting when they finally left the cafe. Sophie walked between them, holding both their hands, swinging their arms and singing a song from her concert. Victoria felt something she hadn't felt in 7 years. Not happiness exactly, but possibility. The sense that the future was unwritten instead of predetermined. Same time next week? Ethan asked as they reached his car. Victoria hesitated, aware of crossing lines, of stepping into territory that could complicate everything. Then she thought about spent 7 years playing it safe, building walls, choosing security over truth. Yeah, she said. Same time next week. Sophie hugged her goodbye, fierce and unself-conscious. Ethan met her eyes over his daughter's head, something passing between them that didn't need words. Victoria drove home as the city lights came on, one by one, illuminating the December dark. Her phone was full of messages she'd answer eventually, from Catherine's team, from Sarah and the ethics committee, from reporters still trying to get her story. But right now she just drove, letting the city flow past, feeling the weight of 7 years finally lifting. She didn't know what came next, didn't know if the lawsuit would succeed, if she'd find new work, if this fragile connection with Ethan would become something more or remain just friendship. Didn't know how to reconcile with her father, or if reconciliation was even possible. But for the first time since Daniel died, Victoria Hale was asking the right questions. And sometimes that was the only answer that mattered. The lawsuit was filed on January 12th, exactly 2 weeks after Victoria was supposed to become COO. Catherine Price held a press conference on the courthouse steps, Victoria standing beside her with 11 other plaintiffs, workers who'd been injured, silenced, and finally found their voices. The media descended like locusts. Victoria's face was on every news channel, every website, every social media feed. The narrative split predictably. Half painted her as a whistleblower hero, standing up to corporate greed. The other half portrayed her as a spoiled heiress, having a tantrum, destroying her father's legacy out of spite. The truth, as always, was more complicated. Richard Hale's response came within hours. A statement released through corporate communications, cold and precise. These allegations are baseless and motivated by personal grievances rather than facts. Hale Industries has always prioritized worker safety and will vigorously defend against this frivolous litigation. No mention that the defendant was his daughter. No acknowledgement of their relationship at all. Victoria read the statement in Catherine's office, surrounded by legal documents and evidence files. She felt nothing at first. Then everything at once. Grief, anger, relief, loss. 7 years of trying to be the daughter he wanted, erased in a single press release. "You okay?" Catherine asked, watching her carefully. "No, but I will be." Victoria set down her phone. "What's next?" "Discovery, depositions. Your father's lawyers will try every trick to delay, discredit, and destroy our case. This could take years." "I've got time." The first month was brutal. Hale Industries' legal team went scorched earth, filing motions to dismiss, challenging every piece of evidence, sending private investigators to dig into Victoria's life and the lives of every plaintiff. They found embarrassing photos, old debts, minor legal infractions. Anything that could be used to paint the plaintiffs as unreliable, opportunistic, damaged. They were especially thorough with Ethan. Cole, the investigators' report began. They'd gotten his sister's name confused with his, a small victory of incompetence. Subject has a history of unstable employment, relationship difficulties, and financial struggles. Former girlfriend filed for emergency custody when subject was unable to maintain stable housing. Subject's musical career ended due to his own negligence in operating machinery while fatigued. Victoria read it in Catherine's office, her hands shaking with rage. "This is character assassination. None of this is relevant. It's all relevant if they can convince a jury he's not credible." Catherine pulled the report away. "Don't let it rattle you. We knew this was coming. They're making him sound like a deadbeat. He's one of the best fathers I've ever seen." Catherine raised an eyebrow. "You're close to Mr. Cole. We're friends. He's—" Victoria stopped, aware of how defensive she sounded. "He's important to this case. He's important to you." Catherine's voice was gentle. "Which is fine, but be careful. Your father's team will use any personal connection to undermine the lawsuit, paint it as revenge, not justice." She was right, of course. The headlines started within days. Heiress quits empire for maintenance worker romance. The tabloids had a field day, manufacturing a love story from park visits and coffee shops, turning Victoria's Choice into a soap opera. Victoria stopped reading the news, stopped checking social media, stopped caring what strangers thought about her motivations, but she couldn't stop caring about the impact on Ethan and Sophie. She found out how bad it had gotten when Sarah Chen called her one evening in late January. "Have you talked to Ethan recently?" "Not since last week. Why?" "Someone spray-painted traitor on his apartment building. Sophie's been getting bullied at school, kids saying her dad's a liar trying to get rich off fake injuries." Sarah paused. "It's getting ugly, Victoria." Victoria felt her stomach drop. "Is Sophie okay?" "Ethan pulled her from school for a few days, says she's scared to go back." Victoria hung up and immediately called Ethan. It rang 4 times before he answered, his voice tired. "Hey. Sarah told me what's happening. I'm so sorry. I never meant for Sophie to—" "It's not your fault." But his voice said otherwise, heavy with exhaustion. "Let me help. I can hire security, talk to the school, something—" "Victoria, stop. We don't need your money." A pause. "We just need this to be over." The line went quiet. Victoria heard Sophie crying in the background, small hiccuping sobs that broke her heart. "I'm sorry," Victoria said again, inadequately. "I know, but sorry doesn't fix this." Ethan's voice cracked slightly. "I thought I was ready. Thought standing up was worth it. But watching my daughter cry because of something I chose—" "You chose to tell the truth. That's not wrong. Doesn't make it easier." Sophie's crying got louder. "I have to go." He hung up. Victoria sat in her penthouse, the one she'd soon have to leave, the settlement with Hale Industries requiring her to vacate company-owned property, and felt the weight of every choice pressing down. She'd wanted justice, had wanted to expose the truth, create change, make her resignation mean something. But she hadn't fully considered the cost to the people who stood with her, Ethan and Sophie, paying the price for her principles. Victoria looked at her phone, pulled up her father's contact. Her thumb hovered over the call button. She could end this. Could call Richard, apologize, drop the lawsuit in exchange for peace. Could protect Ethan and Sophie from further harassment. Could go back to being invisible, insignificant, safe. She put the phone down. The next morning, Victoria showed up at Ethan's apartment with coffee and donuts. He answered the door looking like he hadn't slept, Sophie visible behind him in pajamas, her eyes red from crying. "I know you said you don't need help," Victoria said before he could speak, "but I'm offering it anyway. Not money, just presence. Someone who understands." Ethan looked at her for a long moment. Then he stepped aside, letting her in. Sophie was quiet, subdued in a way that hurt to see. Victoria sat on the floor next to her, said nothing, just started drawing with the crayons scattered across the coffee table. After a while, Sophie joined her, still silent but present. "The school called," Ethan said from the kitchen. "They want to meet about the bullying. Said they're taking it seriously now that lawyers are involved." "That's good." "Is it? Or is it just more attention, more drama, more ways for this to hurt her?" He leaned against the counter, defeated. "Maybe I should drop out of the lawsuit, take Sophie somewhere quieter, start over." "You could, but that's letting them win." "I don't care about winning anymore, Victoria. I care about my daughter." Sophie looked up from her drawing. "What's winning mean, Daddy?" Ethan knelt beside her, brushing hair from her face. "Nothing, baby, just grown-up stuff." "Is it about the bad people at your work?" Sophie's voice was small. "The ones who hurt your hand?" Ethan and Victoria exchanged glances. They'd tried to shield her from the details, but kids absorbed more than adults realized. "Yeah," Ethan said gently. "It's about making sure they don't hurt other people." "But they're hurting us now." Sophie's eyes filled with tears again. "The kids at school say you're lying, say we're bad people trying to steal money." "We're not bad people, Sophie. We're telling the truth." Then why does telling the truth make everything worse?" The question hung in the air, unanswerable. Victoria felt tears burning her own eyes. This 7-year-old had just articulated the central paradox of moral courage. Doing the right thing often came with immediate suffering, while the rewards, if they came at all, arrived slowly and uncertainly. "Because sometimes the truth is hard," Victoria said, surprising herself. "Sometimes it makes people angry or scared, but that doesn't make it wrong to tell." Sophie looked at her with those wide, trusting eyes. "Are you telling the truth too?" "I'm trying." "And people are being mean to you?" "Yes." "But you're not stopping." Victoria thought about her father's silence, about Marcus's anger, about reporters twisting her story into sensational headlines, about losing everything she'd built for a principle that sometimes felt impossibly distant. "No," she said. "I'm not stopping." Sophie nodded slowly, processing. Then she picked up a purple crayon and went back to drawing. Crisis passed for now. Ethan caught Victoria's eye, mouthed, "Thank you." She nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility and connection in equal measure. They spent the day together, the three of them, playing games and watching movies and pretending the world outside didn't exist. It was the most normal Victoria had felt in months. When she finally left that evening, Sophie hugged her tight. "Will you come back?" "If your dad says it's okay." Sophie looked at Ethan. "It's okay, right, Daddy?" Ethan's expression was complicated. Gratitude mixed with wariness, mixed with something else Victoria couldn't quite name. "Yeah, baby, it's okay." February brought depositions. Victoria spent 3 days being interrogated by her father's lawyers. Every decision questioned, every motivation examined. They tried to paint her as unstable, vindictive, a failed daughter lashing out. "Isn't it true, Ms. Hale, that you've struggled with depression since your boyfriend's death 7 years ago?" "I've grieved. That's not the same as depression." "But you've been under psychiatric care?" "Brief counseling after a loss. Again, normal grief." "And isn't it true you became romantically involved with Mr. Cole shortly before filing this lawsuit?" Victoria kept her voice level. "Mr. Cole and I are friends, nothing more. Friends who spend significant time together, who take his daughter to parks and concerts." "Yes, friends." The lawyer smirked. "And you expect this court to believe your involvement in this case has nothing to do with those personal feelings?" "I expect this court to look at the evidence. 47 documented incidents, safety violations, systematic negligence. My personal life is irrelevant." But it wasn't irrelevant, and they both knew it. The narrative was being written. Jilted daughter, romantic entanglement, revenge disguised as justice. The only bright spot came when Ethan gave his deposition. Victoria wasn't allowed to attend, but Catherine reported back with barely concealed excitement. He was perfect, calm, detailed, unshakable. Your father's lawyer tried every tactic: aggression, sympathy, confusion. Ethan just kept telling the truth. Catherine grinned. At one point, the lawyer suggested he was exaggerating his injuries for financial gain. You know what Ethan did? What? Took off his watch, asked the lawyer to examine his right hand, made him look at the scarring, the limited mobility, then said, "This is what $200,000 bought. Not nearly enough, but it's what I got. I'm not here for more money. I'm here so the next person doesn't have to make the same choice I did." Catherine shook her head in admiration. Half the room was in tears. Victoria felt pride swell in her chest, warm and unexpected. Ethan had found his voice. After 7 years of being invisible, he was making himself heard. The case built momentum through March. More plaintiffs came forward, inspired by the publicity despite the harassment. Catherine's team uncovered internal memos showing Hale Industries executives knew about safety deficiencies and chose to delay fixes to maintain quarterly targets. The evidence was damning. Even the most skeptical reporters started questioning whether this was really just a family dispute. Victoria's father remained silent, conducting business through lawyers and spokespeople. She hadn't spoken to him since the board meeting, hadn't tried. The gulf between them felt unbridgeable now, carved too deep by years of unmet expectations and fundamental disagreement about what mattered. Then, on March 15th, everything changed. Victoria was having dinner at a small restaurant when her phone rang. "Miranda, turn on the news, Channel 7, now." Victoria pulled up the live stream on her phone. The anchor was mid-sentence. "Shocking development in the Hale Industries lawsuit. Sources close to the company report that CEO Richard Hale suffered a heart attack this afternoon and is currently in intensive care at Metropolitan Hospital. His condition is listed as critical." The phone slipped from Victoria's hand. She was in her car 30 seconds later, driving too fast through evening traffic, her hand shaking on the wheel. Critical condition. Her father. The man she'd spent 7 years trying to please, 3 months trying to defeat, her entire life trying to understand. The hospital was chaos. Reporters camped outside, security doubled, executives in expensive suits pretending concern while positioning for succession. Victoria pushed through them all, using her name like a weapon for the first time in months. "I'm his daughter. Where is he?" The nurse led her to ICU, where her father lay connected to machines that beeped and hummed and measured the rhythm of his failing heart. He looked smaller than she'd ever seen him, diminished by weakness in a way he'd never allow himself while conscious. A doctor intercepted her outside the room. "Ms. Hale, I'm Dr. Patterson. Your father suffered a massive coronary event. We've stabilized him for now, but the next 48 hours are critical." "Will he—" Victoria couldn't finish the sentence. "Too early to say. He's strong, but the damage was extensive. I'm sorry." Victoria stood at the window, looking at her father through glass. All the anger, all the righteous fury that had sustained her through 3 months of legal battle, it evaporated, leaving only complicated grief. He was her father. Whatever else he was, ruthless businessman, indifferent employer, architect of systematic negligence, he was still her father, and she still loved him, despite everything. Her phone buzzed. "Ethan. I heard. I'm so sorry. Do you need anything?" Victoria almost laughed. Here was Ethan, the man her father had destroyed, offering comfort. The irony was too perfect, too painful. "I don't know what I need," she typed back. "Just that he doesn't die hating me." She sat in the ICU waiting room for hours. Board members came and went, offering hollow condolences. Marcus showed up briefly, awkward and uncertain, left without saying much. The lawyers called, asking about the lawsuit's status, whether Victoria would consider settlement negotiations now. She told them all to go to hell. Around midnight, a nurse touched her shoulder. "He's awake, asking for you." Victoria's heart lurched. She followed the nurse into the dim room where her father lay, oxygen tube in his nose, monitors tracking every heartbeat. His eyes found hers, and something flickered there, pain maybe, or regret. "Victoria." His voice was barely a whisper. "I'm here, Dad. Thought you'd left, for good." "I'm still here." Victoria moved closer, took his hand carefully around the IV line. You need to rest. Don't try to talk. Need to? He coughed, winced. Need to say things. While I can. Dad, please! I was wrong. The words came out ragged. About you. About the company. About what matters. Victoria felt tears streaming down her face. You don't have to. Yes, I do. Richard's grip tightened on her hand, weak but insistent. Spent my whole life building something. Thought it was for you. But I was building it for me. My legacy. My proof I mattered. You do matter. Not the way I wanted to. Not the way that counts. His eyes closed briefly. You were right. About the settlements, the safety issues. All of it. I knew. Always knew. Just didn't want to see the cost. Victoria couldn't speak, just held his hand and cried. The lawsuit, Richard continued. Don't drop it. Win. Make the company better than I made it. Better than I could. I can't. I'm not even. You're my daughter. Means you own 20% of voting shares. Didn't think I'd let you leave with nothing, did you? A ghost of his old smile. Even when I was angry. Still my daughter. Victoria stared at him. 20%. Not controlling interest, but enough to matter. Enough to force change from within. Why didn't you tell me? Pride. Stupidity. Pick one. Richard's breathing was labored. Thought if I cut you off completely, you'd come back. Apologize. Fall in line. Instead, you kept fighting. Made me proud. Made me ashamed. Both. Dad, let me finish. He coughed again, harder. The monitors beeped urgently. That maintenance worker, Cole, he made you happy? The question was so unexpected Victoria almost didn't answer. We're just friends. Doesn't matter what you call it. You smile when you talk about him. Haven't seen you smile like that since... He stopped, and Victoria knew he meant Daniel. Life's too short for the wrong people. Trust me. I know. A nurse rushed in, checked monitors, gave Richard something through his IV. You need to rest, Mr. Hale. Your heart can't take the strain. Heart's been strained for years. Might as well use it while it's still beating. But Richard's eyes were drooping, the medication taking effect. Victoria, promise me something. Anything. Don't become me. Stay who you are. The person who fights for strangers, who quits on principle, who finishes other people's songs. His words were slurring now, consciousness fading. Be better than I was. Shouldn't be hard. I love you, Dad. Love you too. Even when I was too stubborn to say it. His eyes closed. Especially then. The monitor settled into a steady rhythm. Richard Hale slept, and Victoria sat beside him until dawn, holding his hand, watching his chest rise and fall, grateful for every breath. He stabilized over the next week. Not recovered, the damage was too extensive for that, but alive. Conscious. According to doctors, he'd need months of rehabilitation and would never work the 80-hour weeks that had defined his life. The board moved quickly to install an interim CEO. The lawsuit continued, gathering steam, and Victoria found herself in an impossible position, plaintiff in a case against a company she now partially owned. Catherine laid out the options in her office, legal documents spread between them. You could use your shares to force a settlement, admit wrongdoing, implement safety changes, compensate victims fairly. It would end this quickly. But it would look like you sued your father just to gain leverage. The public backlash would be significant. Victoria thought about it, about what her father had said. Don't drop it, win. About Ethan and Sophie, about all the other plaintiffs who'd found courage to stand up. About doing this right, not just doing it fast. We continue the lawsuit, she decided, but I'll use the shares differently. Push for reform from inside. Make the board listen. That's a long game, could take years. Then it takes years. I've got time. The trial was set for September. Through spring and summer, both sides prepared. Victoria divided her time between legal strategy sessions and awkward board meetings where she sat as a shareholder but not an executive, an outsider with insider access. She used it carefully, proposing safety audits, questioning budget allocations, forcing uncomfortable conversations about worker welfare. The board hated her, but with 20% of shares, they couldn't ignore her. Slowly, things began to shift. Through it all, Victoria spent time with Ethan and Sophie. Park visits became regular occurrences. Coffee became dinners. Friendship became something neither of them quite knew how to name. One evening in July, Sophie fell asleep on Victoria's couch during a movie, and Ethan carried her to the guest bedroom Victoria had started keeping ready. "She loves you," Ethan said when he came back, settling on the couch with careful distance between them. "Talks about you constantly. Victoria said this, Victoria thinks that. You're her hero." "I'm nobody's hero, just someone trying to do better." "That's what makes you one." Ethan looked at her, and Victoria felt the weight of everything unspoken between them. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Why are you really doing this? The lawsuit, the board fights, all of it. Is it about justice? About your father? About—" He stopped. "About what?" "About me. About us." Ethan's voice was quiet. "Because if this is some kind of redemption narrative where you save the broken maintenance worker, it's not," Victoria interrupted, surprised by the hurt in his voice. "Ethan, this started before I really knew you, before Sophie invited me to her concert. This is about me figuring out what kind of person I want to be. And what kind is that?" Victoria thought about Daniel's unfinished song, about her father's hospital bed confession, about Sophie asking why telling the truth made everything worse. Someone who finishes what she starts, who stands up even when it's hard, who chooses people over profit. "That's a good answer." Ethan smiled slightly. "Very corporate, very inspiring." "Okay, fine. You want the real answer?" Victoria turned to face him fully. "I'm doing this because I was dying inside that corporate world. Because meeting you and Sophie reminded me what actually matters. Because I fell in love with—" She stopped, horrified at what she'd almost said. Ethan went very still. "With what?" Victoria's heart was pounding. "With the possibility of being different, of choosing differently." "That's not what you were going to say." "Ethan, say it." His voice was gentle but insistent. "Whatever you were going to say, just say it." Victoria looked at him. This man who'd completed a dead man's song, who'd stood up despite fear, who'd shown her what courage looked like. This man who'd lost his dreams to her family's company and somehow didn't hate her for it. "I fell in love with what you represented," she said carefully. "With the idea that it's possible to survive loss and still create beauty. That parenthood and art can coexist. That choosing stability over dreams doesn't mean you're a failure." "Still not what you were going to say." "No." Victoria's voice dropped to a whisper. "It's not." Ethan reached across the couch, took her hand. "I know this is complicated. The lawsuit, your father, the power dynamic. I know all the reasons this is a bad idea. It's a terrible idea. The worst." He smiled. "But I think about you constantly. Have since that night at the party when you defended us. When you looked at Sophie like she mattered. She does matter. So do you." Ethan's thumb traced circles on her palm. "I'm not asking for promises. Not expecting you to fix my life or save me from anything. I just want honesty. Do you feel this too?" Victoria thought about 7 years of being with the wrong person for the right reasons. About choosing security over truth, comfort over connection. About Daniel, who'd loved her but died before they could build a life. About her father, who'd finally told the truth only when facing death. "Yes," she said. "I feel it too, have for months. But I didn't want to complicate things, didn't want you to think I was using the lawsuit as some excuse to—" Ethan kissed her, soft and tentative and terrifying. Victoria froze for a heartbeat, then kissed him back, tasting possibility and fear in equal measure. When they pulled apart, both breathing hard, Ethan rested his forehead against hers. "That probably wasn't smart," he said. "Terrible timing, questionable judgment, definitely going to make things harder." "Want to do it again anyway?" Victoria laughed despite everything. "Yes." They sat together on the couch, hands intertwined while Sophie slept in the next room and the city lights glittered outside. It wasn't simple, it wasn't easy, but it was real. The trial began September 15th. The courtroom was packed. Plaintiffs, lawyers, reporters, Hale Industries executives. Richard Hale attended in a wheelchair, still weak but insisting on being present. Victoria sat with Catherine's team, Ethan beside her. Across the aisle, her father met her eyes once, nodded slightly. Permission or approval or just acknowledgement? She wasn't sure. Maybe all three. The trial lasted 3 weeks. Testimony from injured workers, safety inspectors, company whistleblowers, evidence of internal memos, delayed repairs, calculated risk assessments that valued profit over safety. The defense fought hard, but the documentation was overwhelming. On October 6th, the jury returned their verdict. Liable on all counts. Damages. $47 million to the plaintiffs. Mandated safety reforms across all facilities. Public apology from the company. The courtroom erupted. Plaintiffs crying, hugging, celebrating justice delayed but finally delivered. Victoria felt Ethan's hand find hers under the table, squeezing tight. Catherine leaned over, grinning. "We won." "Yeah," Victoria said, watching her father across the courtroom, seeing something like pride in his tired face. "We did." The aftermath was complex. Hale Industries appealed, but settled within months for slightly reduced damages and comprehensive safety reforms. The board, facing public pressure and shareholder revolt, began implementing changes. New safety protocols, independent oversight, transparent reporting. Victoria used her 20% to push for more. Worker representatives on the board. Profit-sharing programs. An end to mandatory NDAs in settlement agreements. It wasn't perfect. Change came slowly, grudgingly, with constant resistance. But it came. Richard Hale retired officially in December, his health too fragile for the stress of leadership. He and Victoria had dinner once a month, awkward at first, then gradually easier. They didn't talk about the lawsuit much. Talked instead about small things, books, weather, Sophie's latest school achievements. On their fourth dinner, Richard asked about Ethan. "You two serious?" Victoria had been expecting the question. "Getting there, it's complicated. Everything worthwhile is." Richard cut his food carefully, his movement still slow from the heart attack. "He treats you well?" "Very." "And Sophie?" "She's amazing, Dad. Smart and funny and kind. You'd like her." Richard was quiet for a moment. "I'd like to meet her, if that's okay. Not as the CEO, just as your father." Victoria felt tears prick her eyes. "I think that could be arranged." They met the following week at a neutral restaurant. Sophie was nervous at first, intimidated by this serious man in the wheelchair, but Richard asked about her school, her drawings, her favorite songs. Within 30 minutes, she was showing him the dance she'd learned in gym class, her natural exuberance overcoming her shyness. Ethan watched it all with cautious hope. When Sophie dragged Richard, wheelchair and all, to see the dessert display, he leaned toward Victoria. "Your dad's not what I expected." "He's not what anyone expected, including himself." "Think he'll ever forgive you for the lawsuit?" "He already has. I'm the one still working on forgiving him." Victoria watched her father listening seriously as Sophie explained why chocolate cake was superior to vanilla. "But we're getting there." Winter arrived, then spring. The first anniversary of Victoria's resignation came and went. She'd found work consulting for nonprofits focused on worker safety, using her corporate experience for actual good. The pay was a fraction of what she'd made at Hale Industries, but she didn't need much. The penthouse was long gone, replaced by a smaller apartment she actually liked. Ethan was still working maintenance. Turned out the lawsuit settlement didn't mean instant career changes, but he'd started teaching piano on weekends, slowly rebuilding the musical life he'd lost. Sophie was thriving, the bullying long past, her confidence restored. And Victoria had learned what 7 years with the wrong person hadn't taught her. That love wasn't about perfect circumstances or careful planning. It was about choosing each other every day through complications and setbacks and the messy reality of building a life together. On a warm evening in May, almost exactly 1 year after that first park visit, Ethan invited Victoria to a small concert venue downtown. "Special performance," was all he'd say, looking nervous and excited in equal measure. The venue was intimate, maybe 50 seats. Victoria arrived to find it packed with familiar faces. Sarah Chen and the ethics committee members, several plaintiffs from the lawsuit, Miranda, even Catherine Price. Sophie sat in the front row, bouncing with barely contained excitement. "What is this?" Victoria asked as Sophie grabbed her hand, pulling her to a reserved seat. "Daddy's going to play. A real concert. His first one in forever." Victoria's breath caught. Ethan on stage, sitting at a grand piano, his right hand, scarred but functional, resting on the keys. He looked terrified and determined, and when his eyes found Victoria's, something passed between them that needed no words. "Thank you all for coming," Ethan said into the microphone, his voice only slightly shaky. "This is my first public performance in 8 years. I didn't think I'd ever do this again. Didn't think my hand would recover enough. Didn't think I'd have the courage." He glanced at Sophie, then at Victoria. "But someone reminded me that standing up, even when it's scary, even when it's hard, is worth it. That finishing what you start matters. That the songs we're afraid to play are often the ones most worth hearing." His hands moved to the keys. Victoria recognized the opening notes immediately, Daniel's song. The one Ethan had finished for Sophie, the one that had started everything. But this time, the melody was different, evolved. Ethan had added new sections, new movements. The original bones were there, Daniel's gift to Victoria preserved. But around it, Ethan had woven new themes, hope and resilience and hard-won joy. It was no longer just a lullaby. It was a story, their story. Daniel's beginning, Ethan's middle, and a new ending that acknowledged pain but chose beauty anyway. Victoria listened with tears streaming down her face, hearing her past and her present and her possible future woven into music. Around her, the audience sat spellbound. Even the critics she spotted in the back row, because of course Ethan had invited critics because he was serious about this comeback, were leaning forward, captivated. When the final notes faded, the silence held for a perfect moment. Then applause erupted, deafening in the small space. Sophie jumped up, cheering for her father. The audience rose in a standing ovation. Ethan stood, found Victoria in the crowd, and smiled. Not the careful, neutral expression of a maintenance worker trying to be invisible, but the full, genuine smile of someone who'd found his voice again. The concert continued for another hour. Pieces Ethan had written over the years, played publicly for the first time. Music born from pain and survival and stubborn hope. The critics took notes. The audience wiped tears. And Victoria watched the man she loved reclaim the dreams her family's company had tried to take from him. After, when the crowd had thinned and Sophie had fallen asleep on a backstage couch, Ethan found Victoria in the empty venue. They stood together in the dim lighting, the piano still open, the evening's triumph settling into quiet satisfaction. "That was incredible," Victoria said. "You were incredible." "I was terrified." Ethan laughed. "Still am. The reviews come out tomorrow. Could be brutal. Could be brilliant. Either way, I did it. Finally." He took her hands. "Thank you for showing me it was possible to be more than invisible." "You were never invisible. I just didn't know how to see." Ethan pulled her close, and they swayed together in the empty venue, no music except their breathing, no audience except themselves, and a sleeping child on a couch. "What happens now?" he asked. "After all this?" "After the lawsuit and the concerts and the headlines finally die down." Victoria thought about it. About her consulting work that felt meaningful instead of hollow. About board meetings where she fought for change, inch by grudging inch. About dinners with her father, slowly rebuilding what the lawsuit had broken. About Sophie calling her Vicky, now, the nickname a badge of belonging. "I don't know," she said honestly, "but I think that's okay. Not having everything planned, just figuring it out as we go. Together, if you'll have me, complications and all." "The complications are my favorite part." Ethan kissed her softly. "They make it real." 2 years later, on a December evening remarkably similar to the one where this all began, Victoria stood in a different venue, larger, more prestigious, sold out weeks in advance. Ethan was performing his first full concert at the Metropolitan Arts Center, the culmination of a comeback that had surprised everyone except the people who knew him best. Sophie, now 9.5, sat beside Victoria in the front row, wearing a velvet dress for the occasion. On Victoria's other side sat Richard Hale, thinner than before but present, insisting on attending despite his doctor's concerns. "Nervous?" Richard asked Victoria as the lights dimmed. "For him? Always. He'll be fine. He's talented. Finally letting people see it." Her father squeezed her hand. "Like someone else I know." Victoria smiled. Their relationship would never be uncomplicated, too much history, too many scars. But they'd found a way forward that honored both the damage and the love. The music began. Daniel's melody, Ethan always opened with it now, a tribute to the composer who'd started the journey, filled the hall. Victoria closed her eyes, remembering the Christmas party where she'd first heard it completed, remembering the impossible recognition, the fear and hope and confusion. So much had changed. So much had been lost and found and rebuilt. When Ethan reached the new ending, the one he'd written that evolved the melody from lullaby to something bigger, something about resilience and second chances, Victoria opened her eyes and found him looking at her across the space between stage and audience. He smiled and she smiled back, and Sophie grabbed her hand, and Richard cleared his throat suspiciously wetly beside her. This was not the life Victoria had planned, not the empire she was supposed to inherit, not the perfect corporate trajectory, not the safe choices that led to predictable outcomes. This was better. After the concert, after the standing ovation and the critics' praise and Sophie's proud declaration that her daddy was the best piano player in the whole world, they went home. To the house Victoria and Ethan had bought together 6 months ago, in a neighborhood that split the difference between her old penthouse district and his former apartment. Sophie was asleep before they got her into pajamas. Victoria and Ethan stood in her doorway, watching her breathe in the peaceful rhythm of childhood. "She wants to take piano lessons," Ethan said quietly. "Asked me to teach her." "Are you going to?" "Yeah, but I'm terrified I'll mess it up. Put too much pressure on her. Turn something she loves into something that hurts." Victoria leaned against him. "You won't. You'll teach her that music is joy before it's discipline, that mistakes are part of learning, that it's okay to stop and start and change your mind." "How do you know?" "Because that's what you taught me. Not about music, about life." They moved to their own bedroom, got ready for bed with the comfortable routine of people who'd learned to navigate shared space. In bed, lights off, Ethan pulled Victoria close. "I've been thinking," he said into the darkness. "Dangerous." "Marry me." Victoria went still. "What?" "Marry me, not because it makes sense or because it's the next logical step. Just because I love you. Because Sophie loves you. Because I want to build a life where we're officially, legally, permanently choosing each other." Victoria's heart was pounding. "That's the worst proposal I've ever heard." "I know, I'm nervous. I'll do better later with a ring and a plan. Yes. And maybe ask Sophie to help because she's good at that stuff and—" "Wait, what?" "Yes, I'll marry you." Victoria laughed, surprised by her own certainty. "Despite the terrible proposal, despite all the reasons it's complicated." "Yes." Ethan kissed her, and it tasted like promises and possibility, and the kind of future that didn't need to be perfect to be worth choosing. They were married the following spring in a small ceremony at the same venue where Ethan had performed his comeback concert. Sophie was the flower girl, taking her role with solemn importance. Richard gave Victoria away, walking slowly but steadily down the aisle without his wheelchair. Sarah Chen was the maid of honor. Catherine Price attended with her wife. Half the plaintiffs from the lawsuit came, celebrating not just a wedding but what it represented, the idea that justice and joy could coexist, that fighting for what's right didn't mean sacrificing happiness. During the reception, Sophie demanded that her father play. Ethan obliged, sitting at the piano with his daughter on the bench beside him, just like that night at the Christmas party 2.5 years ago. He played Daniel's melody one more time, but this time, as he reached the final movement, he handed the performance to Sophie. Her small hands found the notes he'd taught her, playing the ending with careful concentration and surprising grace. The room went silent, watching this child perform music born from loss and completed through love, now being passed to the next generation. When she finished, Sophie looked at Victoria and smiled, proud and happy, and completely unaware of the symbolic weight of what she'd just done. Victoria smiled back, tears streaming down her face, aware that this moment, this imperfect, beautiful, complicated moment, was everything she'd never known to ask for. The music ended. The celebration continued. And Victoria Hale, now Victoria Cole, stood surrounded by people who taught her that real strength wasn't about having all the answers. It was about asking the right questions, about finishing songs, about standing up, about choosing truth over comfort, about love. Years later, when people asked Victoria about the lawsuit, about her father, about walking away from billions to marry a maintenance worker, she would smile and give the simple answer she'd chosen differently, had asked what she wanted instead of accepting what she was supposed to want. And sometimes, late at night when she couldn't sleep, she'd go to the music room in their house and sit at the piano Ethan had taught Sophie on. She'd play the opening notes of Daniel's melody. The beginning she'd thought died with him, the middle Ethan had completed, the ending Sophie was learning. The song that had changed everything, that had reminded her some things mattered more than empires. She'd play until her fingers remembered what her head had forgotten, that life wasn't about perfect harmony. It was about finding beauty in the dissonance, about standing up even when your voice shook, about finishing what you started, even when the ending looked nothing like you'd planned, about second movements, still unfolding, still alive, still beautiful, precisely because they were imperfect. And in the morning, when Ethan found her there, he'd sit beside her on the bench. Together, they'd play, his scarred right hand in her steady left, finding notes that shouldn't fit, but somehow created something better than perfection. They'd play, and Sophie would wake up to music. And outside, the city would wake too, full of people making impossible choices, fighting quiet battles, learning that courage wasn't the absence of fear. It was choosing truth anyway, choosing each other anyway, choosing to finish the song.